Not for Glenn. Not for Maggie.
Oh no, our priest.
You're doing it for you.
That's awkward. Quick, I've got a fucking drum still rolling there.
So it all goes right. And you do it. How do you do it?
It wouldn't matter.
You bring to me.
I think he left because the dude's not. Just put it on a root blue type of deal. Well, that cost me like 7 gold for supplies. Shit's getting pricey.
Just come with me. You can't.
Just gonna go.
Oh.
You're lying.
I'm not.
I guess I'm just solo tanking this. They're looking for a main tank. I don't know who's the off tank. Is it just
Shouldn't
the
go.
hunter pet, I guess?
But I can't stop you.
Well, I need some weapons on this character, like
No.
daggers.
They won't.
Could use the 6 IG 6 strength from the first boss. There's a cape
hide them in the
somewhere
hallway
right there.
closet. No, you said
And
closet.
this. And then,
It's
like,
my bedroom.
I'll have like.
What if they
full
came in
this.
here before I...
Before you tried to give us up.
They would have killed you first.
Honey,
Warriors
I'm
the
talking to
off tank.
Jesus. Stop. Why are you even
Okay.
defending her? We're here right now because she and Rich didn't handle things like they said they would.
The Saviors tried to kill you.
That was a misunderstanding. As soon as the Saviors leave, we get them the hell out of here before something bad really happens.
Stop! They're staying. Or do you want to make it public? You want to make the deal with Alexandria public? Lose your plausible deniability? Lose your position?
So you're gonna be in charge now?
No. It's just that you won't be. Maggie and Sasha are staying. I'm staying. We're all going to be one big, happy, dysfunctional family.
So we will be. And I'll see us through this. I made progress with them today. You saw it.
That's not what I saw.
Yeah, well, that's what happened. We play nice, they play nice. See, dear, saviors can actually be quite reasonable. Fine watch. Doesn't need to be left out in the rain.
This is our home now. So you'll learn to start to call me by my name. Not Marcia, not dear, not honey. Maggie. Maggie Ree.
When I got here, Gregory was already in charge. Thought the people chose him for a reason. Looking at it now, I think it just happened.
Okay, no. What can we listen to today? Warriors. This guy might be the alternative. These are kind of a little low on mana. Just get a little bit of drinky poo here. So we're clearing those. What, like this shit over here? Give me this. Our boys, my LOS. Oh god, no.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find a slightly better frame of mind.
people asking for water, like store-bought water is better. You all ready? What the fuck does the Rogue One end? Alright, let's go. Shit, I forgot to put on the, what do you call it? Lava Lab. Oh, there goes my purse on this. Grab that. We got here a sword and bump. Slow down. Priest, get on that. He's good. Got off our boy. Ooh. Oh no. Oh no. Heal me. Taunt. Oh, there goes all my buffs. Whatever. No part. No one here is probably parsing anyway. Whatever. buffs, god damn it. Oh well. I'm only here for a couple pieces of loot. We always got the other shaman tank as well. Resist shit. Awful show. Ow! No. Get me out of that shit. We got here. I already have it. I'll create it. Yeah, that's what it's called, right? No. Molten Blast. Oh, whoops. Forgot about this guy over here. That's better than 6-inch. No, it's actually not. That was close. Go molten blast here.
As I fell to the ocean floor, fading light through an open door, I saw myself rise with the water. They thought they could keep me down, hold that breath and watch me drown, but all they did was push me higher. We don't care what they say, we will be here all day, we'll stay until it's over. Till the world's out of sight, we will stand, we will fight, it's not over.
Oh, damn. I guess I can use my mana pot here. I'm going to be using Shadow Protection for the next couple of bosses. played lists. Shit. I didn't pick that. That is a defense thing I want. Pass. Alright, I got the tanking neck. That's also one thing that I wanted on this guy. This gal.
deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path along the lines. But always know that you'll be safe. I'll be here throughout your days. Come find me and we will play.
Shit, I forgot Lava Lash. It's fine. Take one for the team. Cut tank. Shit. You guys got this. This weapon, does that do more than my... Yeah, it does. I'm taking that. Pass. I only got 2 things out of this. Shit, did I lose that? Okay, no, we got it. Alright. That's an AoE fist right there. Now I need money on my other shaman tank for another run. We can check. I still gotta wait for mail though. So I guess maybe do a little bit of RFC on the mage in the meantime. Okay, I need to learn fist weapons though. That's an orc. Hold on, I need to look it up. This weapon trainer. Where's this at orc? This weapons. Let's boon this. Where's our reagent lady over here? Jeez. Actually, how much do I got 5 gold on both. In an hour or so, I'd have the money sent to our boys, so I guess let's do that. Well, send it now, then let's go learn, we can train our fist weapon while we're, like, waiting for mail to get to him. Shaman tanks, what is that? Here's 3 gold. Oh, I won this shit with, like, greed? Oh, my bad. Alright, so we have a tank neck now to add down somewhere around there. With my other tanking gear. That can go in the bank for Ellie/Arista. I don't think I'm gonna play Ellie or Arista, but I mean, I've got some pieces for it. Alright, let's head to... Ooh, can we not boon? Should I not buy a boon, or should I not afford it? Wait, what? Am I blind? Where's our lady here? Did I not buy that? 16. Oh, wait, did I unboon now? What the hell? Did I not unboon? Wait, what? I'm lost here. What? No. But this is... Huh. Whatever. Let's, so Orgrimmar, right? Fist weapons, comments. Shamans, this person says no class starts with the ability to use fist weapons, but druids, hunters, rogues, and shamans and warriors can. Oh, okay. Never mind. I was going to say, excuse me? So yeah, that'll be a higher DPS weapon here, and my Lava Lash will hit really hard with this as an offhand, and then I just need like the dagger for like this, which is from Ocarina. Let's go learn it. Macro. What will our offhand be here? I can get either the dagger from what's his name, second boss turtle dude, or from Ocarina. Because they both hit hard, but apparently the other one, like, from his full power and armor on it, just makes it this for like a main hand. So that I have that on my my alt shaman has both daggers actually, Akamai and the turtle dagger. Okay, so actually I still need those. I have almost every other piece here. I don't know if there's a tanking ring. I don't think so, but definitely need. I think there might be a tanking cloak of some sort. That might have. Let's see. I need some kind of tanking back here. If they drop it, this right here, I think 6 strength might be it. I don't think I've ever seen anything else. Only 6 agility. Is there a tanking pack in this raid? That's one thing I'm realizing now, that I've got almost everything else that I need on this guy, this girl. I guess I go for the 6 strength. back that drops off of this guy. Yeah, I guess that's... I've seen it drop and I've passed on it almost every goddamn time. Unless there's something here. Yeah, I want this one right here for my main hand weapon. So I guess there... Yeah, I guess the 6 strength, 6 spirit would be better than this, because I want strength over agility for threats. Yeah, I guess we could, wait, maybe I should also send over gold from my mage. It's about 8 gold to like buy all the consumes. Then we'll have to do a bit more shit to buy our mage his buffs for our 3rd character run through BFD. I'm not too worried about like my mage shit. Like that, see that mage there? He's at the bottom of the meter. That was basically me on my first BFD on the mage. They're not exactly super good single targets. I might have to, or I'll try raiding as arcane. I was fire for 3 days ago on that BFD. But we're still gonna use the dagger, I believe, for dagger and shield. But it's not going to be part of our dual wield setup now. Where's the other? Oh yeah, other warriors top damage. Hold on. All right, let's go learn the Shia. Then I guess we go train our offhand on things. I guess what I did was like I fought shit in the Barrens, but also hold on, let's also send shit to our other shaman with the gold my mage has. Whoops. Do I have drums on this character?
As I fell to the ocean floor, fading light through an open door, saw myself rise with the water. They thought they could keep me down, hold their breath and watch me drown, but all they did was push me higher. We don't care what they say, we will be here all day, we'll stay until it's over. Till the world's out of sight, we will stand, we will fight, it's not over till it's over. Through the nights in the rain, through the time and the pain, the stand will never fall. And then at the end of it all, we will win, we will chant, it's not over till it's over.
Do I got post running on this guy? Do I have Darkman on this? No. Oh, that's a bummer. Do I got drums? No. No, okay. No big parsing for this guy, but it's fine. Mage, give me some gold. Ooh. Shit, but do I have enough for fist weapons now on my main? Let's see. It's fine if we don't. I need to learn that shit right now, but it would have been something to do while we wait for the gold to get to our alt shaman. I guess I could sell this shit, so I don't need either of these. What I really want is gear on my maid so I can do like big, huge pulls. Equip this. Alright. Not bad, not bad. They're literally reusing the assets of what the Druids of the Fang and Wailing Cavern have this weapon, I'm pretty sure. And also my unarmed should be leveled decently from getting disarmed so many times. Yeah, okay, not that much of a grind. Get that finished and we'll yeah, we got two hard-hitting weapons on both ends now. Kinda, I mean, I can definitely use the dagger from like Turtle or the other one. Why are shamans saying they can't see their enchants? Like, I see my enchants perfectly fine for weapon abuse. So let's go kill some shit south of Rajo, I guess. Make a little bit of gold and level our shit. Give me a rough estimate of like when it's an hour for me to log on to my other shaman, get the gold, buy some red supplies. This they run me too. probably change the title of the stream. Yeah, figuring how much I can pull on my main BFD reset.
2019 was one of the greatest years in Zelda speedrunning history, in which several new discoveries broke every 3D Zelda game wide open.
Actually, I've
for
read
Twilight
this.
Princess.
I mean, I've seen this.
Many of these new discoveries.
Goodbye, internet. That pack quit. Wow, I used to watch his videos like before when he was the actual editor of his own channel. He was like a small channel with like less than 100K.
I'll be handing off the channels to someone else. That's it. Send tweet. We're all done here. That's all you need to know, right? Oh, wow. Forgive me, by the way, if I'm a little bit more disorganized than usual. Normally, I would want to script out something like this pretty precisely. But with an announcement like this, I wanted to bring it back to just us. There's no one else in the room. There's no teleprompters. There's no nothing. It's just the way that this whole thing started. It's a conversation between us. And sorry that I keep getting emotional about this. I'll try not to, but it's a big deal. You know, like, if you think about it, this channel is Steph and my first child, really. Before we had Ollie, before we had Skip, Catbat, like, it was this. This was our baby. This channel has been going for 13 years. I think in total it's somewhere around like 1,200 theories. And only half of those are FNAF. Shocking. I know, we actually did stuff that wasn't FNAF related. But this has been a literal third of my life. And I'm gonna miss you. I'm gonna miss this. I value what we have here. I value this conversation, this openness, this relationship that we share. And I'm sad that I won't be able to see you every week. Which then I guess prompts the question of like, why? Why am I doing this now? Why am I making this announcement today? Why am I walking away from the channels? Well, to be honest, it was Tom Scott. You can blame Tom Scott. Tom just did his farewell video and I'm like, well, he was able to do it. I want to be able to fly away in a helicopter. Obviously, that's not it. But really, my reasons for making this announcement today is probably largely the same as Tom's reasons, or Seth Everman's, or Captain Sparkle's, or Papa Meat's, or Stampy Longhead's. Like, there's a lot of these videos that are coming out these days, and there's gonna be a lot more happening throughout this year. Steph and I have known this video would be coming for the last 3 years. We weren't sure it was necessarily gonna be today. We didn't know exactly when it would fall, but we knew it was gonna happen eventually. That's why over the last couple years we've been staffing up so much. That's why we partnered with a larger company to help run the channels. That's why we've been spending so much time outside of this box training up the team to make the best videos that they can. Because we knew that we couldn't do this forever. We knew that honestly we didn't want to do this forever. For as much as I love you and I love overthinking things and I love theorizing, I don't love late nights. I don't love the fact that Steph and I have been work first for over a decade, where I'm sitting down at dinner with my best friend and we're talking about business logistics, or we're talking about animatronic toes. I miss the days where I could just sit down on the couch with her and play video games and it's not for content, or I'm playing a game and I'm not thinking about what theories are gonna come out of that. I miss it. So that's a big reason. That was a big one right there. But also just the internet's changing. My life has changed in the last 13 years. I mentioned Ollie before. He's the coolest little dude, and he's getting older by the minute. And I watch him, and he is so much fun, and he is so much smarter than I was when I was his age. He also probably knows the FNAF lore better than I do, which is a problem that I should probably address at some point. But honestly, I want to be able to spend more time with him. Another sad fact of the matter is I'm getting older. I'm 37 now. The other day, I actually had to Google my own age. And you know that when you have to start like doing math in your head to calculate how old you are over the hill, my friends. Though to be fair, to my credit, I think I'm like the only 37-year-old out there who has an unironic appreciation of Skibidi Toilet. Then again, maybe that's the problem, right? Like, maybe that's not a good thing. And honestly, because this is all about us being honest, there is a bit of a selfish side to this. When you think about it, there's only really 2 ways to step away from a YouTube channel. You either just decide the day that you stop uploading and you're like, I'm done, or you just keep uploading videos from now until the heat death of the universe, and you watch as your relevance slowly dies or your passion slowly dies. And for me and my journey in this place, I always wanted to go out on a high note. And when you stop and look at the last year, this has been the best year in the theorist lifespan ever. Like, no joke. It is our highest view year. It is the year where we launched Style Theory and immediately put our foothold in a brand new space, and that took off, and now we're one of the top style and fashion channels on YouTube. And that kind of completes the trifecta of, hey, we now have a top channel in 4 different verticals that are completely different, and no other YouTuber really has ever been able to do it to that scale. That's amazing. This is also the year where I was able to meet you guys at our Broadway show. I was able to play at the PGA and show that, hey, YouTubers aren't particularly good at golf, but they can make your event relevant for like a couple of minutes. It was also the year that I got to host the Streamy Awards, and it wasn't cringe. I mean, to be fair, the Streamy Awards are always a little bit cringe, but it was the right amount of cringe. When I pull up videos of all my favorite creators, and I watch them, and all of a sudden I start hearing people just casually dropping, that's just a theory.
It's just a theory, a game theory.
Now this is just a theory, people.
At the end of the day, it's just a game theory.
That's just a theory. A Freebirds theory.
Also a lot of lore, so if you're a big theory head, proceed at your own risk.
I did not know about this theory.
That's a theory.
Okay.
That right there, that is incredible. And that's the note that I want to leave on. And that's how you just know it's the right time. All of those reasons coming together, saying, hey, this is the moment. And that's hard to say, because change is scary. Change is hard. But sometimes the right decision isn't the easy decision. The easy decision would just be to carry on doing this and do FNAF Part 332. But that wouldn't be the right decision. I think the best way to explain it is with a video game analogy. Feels appropriate, right? Whoa, it's game theory, ha! Did it. Check the game part of it off. But the way I like to think about it is Earthbound. I think I've made it pretty clear over the years that that is, without question, my favorite game of all time. Sans' Nest, all that, you're all familiar with that. But what you might not be familiar with at this point is how the game ends. At the end of Earthbound, after you save the world, everything opens up to you. You can revisit every single location that you've been to. You can talk to every NPC that you met on your journey. And it's this incredible moment as a gamer. You see just how many lives have been impacted thanks to your journey. And then after spending as much time as you want talking to all those people, you end up back home. You go back to where it all began, where you were just a kid waking up in bed and starting your adventure. And even though your mom's there and your dog's there and your weird telephone dad's there, it feels different somehow. Like, sure, this is still a place of love and acceptance and comfort and security, but you just don't quite fit anymore. Because you just traveled the world. You made all these new friends. You are different. You grew up. And your relationship to this place grows up. It evolves. In case you couldn't tell, I'm Ness, which I guess would also mean that I'm also Sans. But I was also Ness in the FNAF movie, which just opens up all sorts of weird canon. Slap a thumbnail on that one. So anyway, there you have it. That is why I'm leaving. I hope you can understand. But that obviously begs the question of, like, what happens to the channels? Well, for the next 10 weeks, we're gonna have ourselves a big old going away party. If Unis Annus taught us anything, it taught us that you probably shouldn't use urine for a personal sauna. But if Unis Annus taught us 2 things, one was to not soak in your own urine, but 2 was to appreciate the time that you have left. So that's why over the next 10 weeks, we're gonna have a bunch of theories that are gonna be a lot of fun, revisiting old favorites, getting some closure on things. We're gonna see some familiar faces, a lot of awesome stuff. Although to be fair, I think it's 9 weeks, and I think we counted this one as week 1. That was stupid of us. That, my friends, is how you wind up getting Wario being 10 feet tall. Mathematical rigor. Should have double-checked the numbers. So I have 9 theories left on each of the channels, but we're gonna call them Matt Pat's Final 10 because that just sounds better. At which point then on March 9th, we're gonna have that big going away celebration, Matt Pat's Final Theory, and I just dust away. I stand astride my Music Man and I just whip a Nene off into the distance. But then something special happens. Do the channels go away with me? No, actually. I've always thought that anyone can be a theorist, right? If you are passionate about a topic and you love to overthink it and over-research it, then congratulations, you're a theorist. And that could range from, hey, I have family recipes that I'm constantly looking to refine, to, hey, I want to create the perfect fantasy sports team. Because here's the thing, sports pros, at the end of the day, if you are in the statistics and numbers and doing calculations to see if your team won or lost, you're just playing a glorified Dungeons and Dragons game. I hate to break it to you, you're one of us, my friends. And sure, game theory is a format that I created. It's a show with this very excitable host who makes a lot of cringy dad jokes and says the word lore a lot. But at the end of the day, it's more than just the host. It is a show. It is a format. And in a broader sense, it is a state of mind. It's a way of thinking and approaching the world around you. It's more than just the host. And when you think about it, not a lot of YouTube channels function that way. We're special in that regard. Like, you're not going to be able to get another Markiplier stepping into the Markiplier channel. And you're never going to be able to recreate Jenna Marbles. And to be honest, you're never going to get another MatPat either. But you can have another game theorist. You can have another film theorist or food theorist or style theorist. I think in a lot of ways, we almost function kind of like the Doctor Who of YouTube, where as one host fades away, a new one kind of respawns in their place. And they're able to put their own unique spin and flavor on the format and make it their unique thing. You have eras of the different theorist channels. And so, you know, my era is fading away and someone new is coming in. Maybe this is the David Tennant to Matt Smith transition, right? Good, solid series of episodes right there. So who then is going to be taking over the channels? Well, I don't know if you've noticed this, but fewer and fewer of the words that I'm saying in any given episode are actually mine. If you go down to the credits, you can actually see in the description that there are certain names that have been appearing more and more frequently. Like, yeah, I'm listed on every single one as the writer because I touch every single script, I polish it into my voice, but in all honesty, the bulk of what I'm saying is coming from someone else. It's their research, it's their work. Why should they have to filter their creativity through my voice? I've always envisioned these channels as a place where we could spotlight all sorts of creators. I mean, it even goes back to the original URL of this channel, right? It isn't game theory, it was always the game theorists, because this was a place where you could find a lot of like-minded creators, all with a passion for gaming and education. That's why we had the partner shows like Gaijin Goomba with Culture Shock, or Drake with Smash History, or Ryder with A Brief History, or Austin with The Science, and Lee with Breakdown. They were all here because we all had a similar goal: to educate people through the lens of gaming. And then YouTube pivoted and then made it so that way doing a channel in that style doesn't really work anymore. But we still tried to keep that ethos alive by making sure that we're regularly covering small indie projects. Stuff like OnlyCans, like Mandela Catalog, like OWO. OWO, see? I learned. But if we're doing that for all these other creators, why aren't we doing it for the creators on our own staff, who have been in the trenches doing the research, writing these words to deliver to you over the last couple years? I have been fortunate. I have been so blessed to have this platform available to me that you've given me over the last 13 years. But I think now it's time to pass it on to the next generation. It's time to give someone else a shot. But I realize that I'm getting off track here, so back to the question, who's taking over? First off, it's not going to one person, but rather 4. I would not wish my schedule on anyone. Like, sure, I'm willing to not sleep for the last 13 years of my life, but I feel like as old man YouTube passing this along to the next generation, I should probably do my best to try and make it more sustainable for them. It's also going to people that you're already familiar with. You've seen them showing up in shorts, you've seen them here on the couch with me for GT Live, you've sometimes seen them washing their hair with me in my own shower. Don't read too much into that, but it is accurate. Most importantly though, they're each an expert in their own individual subject matter, and they've been spearheading the creative of the channels for the better part of the last year. And I think what's maybe the most fascinating about all of this is that each of the 4 of them come to us from a completely different angle. You know, so for instance, you have Lee, right? Lee's gonna be taking over film theory, and Lee has been with us for 10 years. 10 years, it's crazy. I believe he was actually editor number 3 for the channels. We had Ronnie, and then we had Ryder, Foot of a Fair.
Oh yeah, Ronnie, he
and
committed
then
suicide.
we had Lee. I think his first theory that he ever worked on was Rosalina's Peach's daughter, Peach is Dead. One of my all-time favorite episodes that we've ever done on the channel. And over time, he rose up. He had his own show on the channel here. He had Breakdown, which were these just beautiful documentaries that were edited in such an incredible way. And since then, he's been spearheading a lot of the creative on both the writing and the visual side. And then, of course, you have Amy over on Style Theory. And Amy is actually a very different case here. When she first approached us, I think it was 6 years ago, she didn't know about the channels. All she knew was that she wanted to learn everything that she could about digital video, and that Theorist was kind of the place that you went to learn that stuff. Like, we were the best when it comes to analytics and optimization and programming and things like that. She got in and she just devoured everything that we threw at her. So much so that she eventually got to the point where she was so good that she was consulting the largest mobile game company in the world based off of the stuff that we were working on here in studio. Incredible. And all of that while being responsible for packaging somewhere around like 500 episodes across all the channels. And then she helped me and Steph brainstorm Style Theory for 2 years before the channel eventually launched, hoping that maybe one day she would be able to rise into the hosting role for it. And now here it is. And then, of course, you have Santi and Tom. Santi over on Food Theory and Tom over here on Game Theory. And interestingly enough, they both grew up watching Game Theory. We were their childhood show, which, to be fair, just shows how old we are. Santi would eventually go work at Mythical with Rhett and Link before coming here, where he is bravely spearheading Food Theory and letting me mercilessly make fun of all of his recipes. He's much better than I give him credit for. I just like giving him a hard time. And then Tom, he worked at Disney and Fox, but he knew all along that he wanted to be here, right? Like, this was his aspirational goal. He wanted to write here. He emailed us a cold email outreach. We just miraculously saw it, decided to audition him, and he crushed it. His first episode that he worked on was actually watching every single installment of the Pokemon anime to calculate Pikachu's level. And to be fair, that was his pitch. Like, I have asked people to do some crazy things in the past, but not even I'm that brutal. Like, you can only watch Team Rocket blast off so many times, but he's like, this is an episode I'm passionate about. I think I'm gonna knock it out of the ballpark, and I'm gonna show you how committed I am. And he has been so committed ever since. So committed, in fact, that I told him, hey, if you're joining the channels, you do realize that you're gonna have to read every single FNAF book. And he's like, boom, he did it. And we're up here going crazy in the FNAF attic. But not only did he read every FNAF novel, he also read every single Hello Neighbor book. Yeah, he went that far. Currently, he's working his way through Bendy because the new movie's coming up. If nothing else, I think that really proves his level of commitment and also his appropriate level of insanity. He's a bit off the cuff at times. Like, I don't know if you saw on a recent GT Live, but Tom was here on the couch with me, and he actually denied that the moon existed, which was a choice.
Main character from the chat says, that sounds like somebody who doesn't have a flag on the moon.
I mean, that's if you believe it's even that.
Oh, the moon? I don't think he actually believes that, but if he does, we're gonna get some weird Majora's Mask theories, let me tell you. When I go out at this point, I am recognized at least 5 times. It's crazy. It's a really high number at this point. And it's a fascinating split because 50% of the time it's like, oh my gosh, you're Matt Pat. You were my childhood. I loved watching your FNAF theories. And I'm always like, well, you know, FNAF's still going. And they're like, what? No way. And we talk about the new game and it's always really fun. But the other half is, oh my gosh, you're Matt Pat. You are my childhood. I'm watching you right now. I loved your most recent theory. And that's awesome. That's such an honor. I have been so honored to be a part of all of your lives. I'm out of range. But I think it's time for someone else to have that honor. I think it's time for someone else to get to ruin some childhoods. And that just kind of leaves us with one final question, right? Which is, what about me? You know, where do I go? Do I just retire to a beach somewhere? Do I whip a nene off into the distance? No. I'll still be here. Obviously, first off, we've got our final 10 episodes, like I said, so that's, well, it wasn't 10 episodes. However many episodes are left between now and March 9th, we got those. I'm gonna be on GT Live from now until the foreseeable future, probably until the end of the summer, that feels about right. And then we have the big going away video on March 9th. After that, I, stand aside as Santi, Lee, Amy, and Tom step up and take over the hosting role. But I'm still gonna be here. I'm still gonna be alongside the creative directors talking about programming, brainstorming ideas for upcoming episodes. That's awesome, I love that, I don't wanna give that up. But the other cool thing about this is that it opens up the door for me to turn the script. For the last 13 years, I've been commenting on other people's IP, but now that I'm stepping out of those roles, I get to create the IP. Still as a part of Theorist, but I get to create things that are gonna challenge those new hosts of the channel. Things that I've had in the back of my mind from years of studying media that I can now make a reality, and the channels can comment on them. Things like, for instance, I have a lo-fi mystery series that I think you're really gonna dig. It's basically like if you took a lo-fi channel and applied an ARG narrative to it, it becomes lore-fi. I am so stoked about this. The music is sounding really good. The animations are coming together really well. That's gonna be launching in a couple weeks. We'll see if Lee over on Film Theory is gonna be able to solve it. In April, I'm actually gonna be coming back onto Style Theory to host a giant fashion show that we're doing there. We all collectively had this thought of like, hey, Online brands, online influencers are coming up with their own apparel lines. Why is there no place to showcase that sort of stuff? And then it hit us like, hey, we have a style and fashion channel. Why aren't we doing it ourselves? Creators in Fashion by Style Theory, that is coming to you in April, hosted by me. Some of the time that I'm not hosting the channels, I'm gonna be practicing my runway walk. Because let me tell you, if I'm sashaying down the runway, if I'm stomping the runway, it's not gonna be pretty right now. So I need to practice that a little bit. There's also this animation show that we did a pilot for in like the middle of last year. It's basically like if you took Gravity Falls but aged it up and made it about adulting. It's really, really solid. And also there's this video game idea that I wanna do for like so long that I've never had the opportunity to really like dive into and make reality. But now it's my chance to step into the role of Scott Cawthon and challenge the new game theorist. There's always been the memes about, are Scott Cawthon and I the same person? Not yet. But who knows, maybe starting later this year. And those are just the immediate things that I have on my to-do list because I want to make fun, cool things for you. And even if it's not a weekly episode, I still want to give those things to you because I think you'll like them. You matter to me. You are so important to me. Every single one of those people who stop me on the street, it's an honor, right? It's interesting. Because of this whole transition, I've been thinking a lot about my time on these channels and the evolution that we've gone to together. In the beginning, right, I was kind of like the edgy older brother where I would talk about like, oh, did you know that Link is dead? And let's make some boob jokes. And then at a certain point, I evolved into Dad Pat, right? I became a little bit more mature. I had the team around me. I had to be more careful about who I was saying was dead on a regular basis. Instead of talking about boobs, I ended up talking about Luigi's bulge. That felt like the right decision. At this point, I think I'm kind of evolving into a Grandpa Pat, you know, for lack of a better term. And just like your grandparents, hopefully cool grandparents, but just like a grandparent, you know, you don't get to see me all the time. And I don't get to see you all the time. And maybe we call and talk to each other every once in a while. But at the end of the day, that grandpa loves getting to see you. Maybe he shows up at a special event. Maybe he shows up at a holiday. Maybe he shows up at the Theory Wear fashion show. Who knows? But he so looks forward to seeing you. And the love that he has for you, it doesn't go away. That grandpa is so proud of you. And he cherishes the relationship that you've had so much. And he is so honored to be a part of your life. To have been a part of helping you grow and helping you experience the world. And he looks forward to seeing you at the next event. And if you see him on the street, we'll hang out. And hopefully he brings you cool, fun gifts. I know this is gonna sound cheesy. And I know the internet will probably rake me over the coals for crying for one, but I love you guys. I do. You're not just numbers. You're not just ad impressions. You're not just merch sales. What you have done for me, and from everyone I talk to, what I've done for you, is special. Special. I can't do that yet. When I was in middle school, I had this goal of making the world a better place because I had been a part of it. It didn't have to be big. It didn't have to be curing cancer. But I wanted there to have been a ripple impact. Just because I was there. Butterfly effect and all that. We've done it. I think we've been able to achieve something great here. You have taken me on the wildest, craziest 13-year ride of my life. I'm so grateful. So, Grandpa Pat is going to sign out now, and I'll be around for a couple more weeks. I'll be living around the house for a while. We'll have a big family reunion celebration. Then I'll go off to my little shack in the woods, my retirement home down in Florida, and I'll pop in every once in a while. Anyway, at this point in my notes, I had it written that we're going to start the countdown clock of that, like, final 10 episodes final 9 episodes, so start that. I don't know what it's going to look like yet. Hopefully the editors don't rip off Unisana's too much. If they do, I hope they change it. And with that, I'm going to say, for one of the final times, not the final time, but one of the final times, as always, my friends, remember, it's just a theory. A game theory. Thank you.
God damn, this almost got me like tearing up and shit. Fuck, back that.
That spell isn't ready. I can't cast that yet. I need to get closer.
When I started this channel 7 years ago, it took me about a month to put together every new video. It's funny, because even back then I couldn't produce videos fast enough to keep up with the YouTube algorithm. The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Now, obviously, research and writing were a big hurdle in that, but the thing that took the most time was editing. I had no idea what I was doing. I was using the base video editor that came with my laptop at the time that had absolutely zero functionality and crashed literally every other day. I would lose just days worth of progress to a crash, a failed render, whatever. I couldn't tell you a keyframe from a crop factor. I was literally stop motion editing frame by frame, pixel by pixel to get things moving across the screen. No exaggeration, thousands of Photoshop files with things just moved a pixel or two at a time. The long story short is that I wasn't very good and I wasn't very fast. And I learned pretty early on that if I wanted the channel to grow at all, that I needed to produce more videos faster. Enter Gaijin Goomba and Ronnie Edwards, two of my fellow creators who had reached out for help earlier that year. Goomba wanted to find more people to watch his show Gaijin Gamer, to which I responded, hey, Goomba, no one really knows or even understands how to spell Gaijin, so thus his show became Game Exchange. Ronnie, meanwhile, reached out to me after the 3rd episode of Game Theory, which was on Illusion of Gaia, just because he was excited to talk to someone who was equally passionate about such an obscure SNES title. What was supposed to be an hour-long interview ended up lasting 3 hours for this podcast that he had just started. Funny enough, that was actually my first ever interview as a YouTuber. Both guys were passionate about fusing education with gaming, just like I was with Game Theory, and I realized that the 3 of us working together had a better likelihood of helping us grow than if we were all working separately. So I asked them to join the channel. To their credit, they said yes. They accepted my offer with little more than a handshake and a promise to deliver them their ad revenue at the end of every month. Times were different on YouTube back then. So with that, at a whopping 10,000 subscribers, Game Theory transformed into the Game Theorists. It became clear that Ronnie liked editing more than writing or hosting, and since, like I mentioned, I sucked at editing, he just focused most of his time on editing for Game Theory. We called it the Editing Dungeon. His first episode was The Cost of Minecraft Diamond Armor. And I remember sitting there watching the first draft of that episode, and finally, for the first time, seeing Game Theory in the way that I had always envisioned it looking. His experience and skill with animation and illustration was able to accomplish things that in 2 years of working on the series, I had never been able to do. But finally, Game Theory was looking the way that I had always envisioned it looking. It was doing things that I had wanted to do and just didn't have the skill to execute on. And for the next 5 years, Ronnie was our go-to editor, a silent hand behind a huge number of the videos that you've seen on this channel, on Film Theory, and all the other Theorist channels. And that's why it shatters my heart to tell you that on July 4th, Ronnie was found dead, a victim of suicide. We found out 2 days later. We had been communicating about a project that he was editing on. He went silent for a couple days, and so we went to his apartment to check up on him, only to be met with a coroner's notice. The next day, Stephanie and I were in the hospital about to have our first baby. As you can imagine, it was an emotional weekend, and it's been an emotional roller coaster ever since. I've been wanting to do this video or say something for the last 2 weeks, But we wanted to hold off on a memorial until we were able to contact his family and get their permission to do it. But Ronnie had a really rocky relationship with his family, and so we've had no luck. And now with news slowly starting to get out that something may be wrong, we had no choice. Ronnie, in all the years that I knew him, dealt with demons that only he could understand. Scars left by a childhood that he kept under lock and key. Over the years, he would give me glimpses as to what he had gone through, but I never had a complete picture. What I can say is that he did his best to move on, to strike out on his own, to move beyond the trauma of his past, to take his mental health into his own hands and take his recovery seriously, one step at a time, every single day. That past also gave him a personality that was probably best described as an acquired taste. He was incredibly sharp and incredibly witty, but he also had this ability to cut through a person's facade in a way that was sometimes hilarious and sometimes a bit off-putting. Even after years of working with him, I would walk away from some conversations questioning whether I should be offended. Like, his sarcasm was so dry that there were times where it's like, was he joking? Or is he mad at me? Should I be offended right now? It was hard to tell sometimes. And it was that same personality that, understandably, sometimes got him into trouble with people who weren't familiar with that part of him, who didn't understand that that's the way he processed the world, that that was the way he dealt with social situations, that he was a person with dark periods, who had a tendency to sometimes lash out with anger. And to anyone who saw that side of him, I am sorry. It wasn't an easy side to deal with, but that wasn't Ronnie. Ronnie wasn't an arrogant person. He was just socially unsure. He was unaware of how his behaviors would be perceived by others. I'm sorry that so few of you got to see the true Ronnie, Ronnie as he really was. The one who gave me a hug at the end of our Game Lab episode together. The one who took pride in his obscure internet trivia. The one who relished in every new dig that he would come up with for Gaijin Goomba. The one who would be so... Those moments were the true Ronnie. When he was unburdened by his past. When sunlight would peek through all the clouds. It would take a lot of patience to get there, and a lot of long conversations and phone calls. But when he got there, it was great, because you knew that it was honest. It was genuine. It was a person who was free. Ronnie told me once in the early days of the channel's history that it was his goal for his animations to be recognized, and for him to be influential as an artist. And if I were to tell him something right now, I would say you did it. That he achieved that goal. That the game theory style, and anyone who has ever mimicked the game theory style, or anyone who has ever had a show on these channels, that was Ronnie's style. He was the person who created that. Over the years, we've had a lot of editors join the team because Lord knows it takes so long to make these episodes. And more often than not, they say that they were inspired by Ronnie and the work that he had done on the show. So I hope that at some point, deep down, he knew the impact that he had and that he had achieved his goal. My one regret is that I never took the opportunity to tell him how proud I was of him. Of how much he had evolved as an artist. Of how sophisticated he had become in his own voice, and how elaborate his animations had gotten. His work hasn't just had an impact here on this channel, his work has had an impact on the internet at large, and I hope that he saw what we all here saw, that he was an incredibly talented artist from day one until the day that we lost him. I think it's just one of those things that your mind gravitates towards in these sorts of situations, right? What you could have done, what you could have said. So I think it really merits mentioning. We're all really busy every hour of every day round the clock. But take the opportunity to tell people what you think, how much you appreciate them, how much you love them, how proud you are of them. Even if that person is really weird in the way that they take their compliments, like Ronnie often was, it'll stick. It'll land. And that compliment will really mean a lot. Any way you slice it, Ronnie's loss is a tragedy. Any loss like this is a tragedy. He was my friend, and he was the person who worked on this channel longer than anyone. second only to Stephanie and I. But I hope that through his tragic loss, there could be some good that comes out of this. That this video and the conversations that ensue in some way start to break down the stigmas around talking about mental health, social anxiety, and suicide. First and most importantly, remember, you are never alone. Never. Even if it feels like you have no one to talk to. Even if you're talking to someone and it feels like they can't say the right thing, it's okay. It's about you not having to carry the burden yourself. It's about you not having to go through this alone. Keep talking. Keep conversations open because it is the single most important thing in these sorts of situations. It's about you being able to give voice to what's wrong, to what you can only experience without being judged. I know from doing fan meetups at events like VidCon that a lot of you who watch this channel go through these struggles, that you're dealing with social anxiety, with suicidal thoughts, with depression. And what I often hear from you in those stories is that this channel, this community, has helped bring you through the darkest of times, the lowest of lows, a breakup, a loss of a family member, whatever dark thoughts might be circulating through your head. And that is the biggest honor for me to hear, that me nerding out in my closet somehow gave you hope to continue on, to know that you weren't alone, that your mind processes things differently and that that's okay, and that other people are out there just like you. But I also recognize that this is a battle that you have to fight every single day, and it's a battle that you have to win every single day. Ronnie fought that battle for a lot of days, and he won for a lot of days. But it only takes one loss. So don't be ashamed to have your voice be heard, to share your story out there with people who are ready and eager to listen to it. The Theorist community is a great place to start. Everyone here is so thoughtful and supportive and loving and caring. That's the beauty of social video in general, that it unites people. And at a time when social video and social media are constantly tearing each other apart, let's remember that it has positive to offer too. That it can unite people. That it can give people who feel like they have no one to listen to them, someone who is there to listen. But also reach out in real life. There are countless numbers of services out there available to help you. Suicide hotlines, websites, therapists, people who are trained to help. I'll include links in the description, but just do a Google search. They are there. But most importantly of all, remember that you are important, that you are valued, and that you are loved by more people than you could ever possibly think of. There's going to be a lot more to come on this channel when it comes to honoring Ronnie's memory. Look out for live streams that are going to be dedicated for suicide prevention charities. I know that Trailer Drake and Gaijin Goomba and some of the other theorists have things planned to honor Ronnie's memory. And in his memory, check out his show, Digressing and Side Questing. It was always one of my favorites. Honor his memory by living, most importantly of all, and talking openly and honestly with each other.
Saving and recording progress has long been an interesting topic in video games. There are several.
So I wanted to expose the horrible, hideous lies of Doom for years. And now that a new Doom just came out, I finally have my chance. Ladies and gentlemen, Doom is not actually a 3D game. It's a 2D top-down shooter. That's right, I said it. This game isn't 3D. You know what else? Wolfenstein 3D also isn't 3D. But Ronnie, you're saying? Just look at the game footage. That's obviously 3D. No, that game footage is a lie. A filthy, filthy lie that id Software has been perpetuating for over 20 years. And let me straighten something out right off the bat. I'm not speaking in terms of, unless you're using an Oculus or a 3DS or something, you're just staring at a 2D picture. No, what I mean is, back in the day, the hardware that these games were running on couldn't actually render 3D like this. It was technologically impossible. So how are they doing it? They aren't. This isn't actually 3D, and none of id Software's games were 3D until Quake. And they weren't the only ones lying to us. Games have been faking 3D for a very long time. Take A Link to the Past. Even though you can ascend to higher levels and jump down to lower levels, every map in-game is actually just 2D. So even though this looks like a high cliff that Link can jump down but can't climb up, everything you're looking at is actually just a flat plane. Sure, they play an animation that looks like he's jumping down, and the ground is drawn in such a way that it looks like two separate heights, but that's all a lie. It's not actually a cliff, it's just a set of tiles that are programmed so you can only traverse them one way. Downwards. And when you do traverse them, it plays a specific animation that gives the illusion of jumping. But in memory, Link isn't actually jumping from a higher place to a lower place. His Y position is just getting lower, pretty much the same way that walking up and down works. This is why enemies, like bats, who are supposed to be airborne above your head, can still be hit with your sword, because no actual Z-axis is being taken into account. This was all just clever trickery, smoke and mirrors. It was all designed to get around the limitations of the SNES. And so was Wolfenstein 3D. Even though it got an SNES release, the SNES itself is not physically capable of handling 3D this sophisticated, and in fact, it's not. Just like A Link to the Past, Wolfenstein 3D isn't actually 3D. It's totally faking it. All of Wolfenstein's maps are essentially 2D maps you could sketch on a piece of graph paper. And in fact, in memory, that's exactly what the computer is calculating. A two-dimensional top-down level like this. This is the player, this is their line of sight. Every fraction of a second, the processor is taking a line and sweeping clockwise across the player's field of view, and drawing whichever wall the line hits. And it does this one column of pixels at a time. So every pixel on this 2D map in memory corresponds to a column of pixels on your screen that the processor is drawing. And depending on how long or short the line is when it hits something, determines how large or small the column of pixels on screen gets drawn, which creates the illusion of depth. If a wall is closer to the player, that means the line is short, which means the processor is going to draw larger columns. A wall farther away means a long line, which means drawing shorter columns. This process is known as raycasting. While the processor has the entire two-dimensional room stored in memory, it's only drawing whatever this beam touches within the player's line of sight. Drawing this stuff takes a ton of processing power, so you don't want to draw any more than you absolutely have to. So even though you as a player are traversing these rooms that appear to have depth, they're actually just representations of a two-dimensional room, and that 2D room is what the computer is actually processing underneath the hood. The processor is actually only looking at and computing things on this two-dimensional map. It couldn't care less what it's drawing on screen. Whatever it's drawing has no bearing on what the processor is actually calculating. When you're playing Wolfenstein, in a sense, you're actually playing a top-down shooter. This is why all the walls are the exact same height, why you don't have stairs, and why you don't see maps with more than one floor. All the maps are a single story and all the walls are the same height, because that's essentially all you can do with these 2D graph paper maps. They're very limited in a way that they wouldn't be if the processor were actually rendering 3 dimensions. This pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking. They're drawing it so it looks like 3D, but what's actually going on are calculations that are purely two-dimensional. If you know enough about technology, you can tell exactly how they're cheating by looking at their limitations. You might notice that Doom has less limitations. This has to be real 3D, right? It has stairs. Nope, Doom is cheating too, and it's cheating even more. Our first hint is that the game doesn't care how far up or down your gun is pointed, only that it sort of lines up with the enemy. See, I'm clearly shooting above this guy's head, yet all of my bullets are hitting him just fine. This isn't some avant-garde design choice. This is because the game is not actually calculating height, it's faking it. Everything, once again, is a 2D floor plan in memory, being drawn as if it's 3D. But the way Doom achieves this illusion is much more sophisticated and clever than how Wolfenstein does it. Wolfenstein is a raycaster. It shoots rays from the player and draws a column that represents whichever pixel the ray touches. What Doom does is called binary space partitioning, and it was a revolutionary idea that all shooters would use in some form or another for the next decade, and it still has applications in game engines today. When you design a level in Doom, you're designing a 2D floor plan, and when you're done with that, the Doom engine chops up your level into tinier and tinier sectors, and creates a data tree that corresponds to these different sectors. Instead of looking at an entire level, let's check out a single room. So I've designed this room. Before we can add this room to the game, the engine will chop this room in half, and chop those halves in half, and chop those halves in half, until everything is chopped to a size and shape that the game engine is comfortable with. And all of these chopped sectors have a corresponding node on the data tree. In-game, when you walk into this room, you enter this sector. That sector matches this node. The processor travels down the tree to this node and draws everything visible to the player within it, and remembers how much of the screen that took up. It then hops to the node closest to this one, and draws everything visible within it, and remembers how much of the screen that took up, and moves on to the next closest node, and the next closest node, and the next closest node, and realizes that everything in this node is being obscured, so it doesn't draw anything, and moves on to the next closest node, and the next closest node, until it's sure that every pixel in your field of view has been drawn. Why does it do this like this, and why does that work like that? Well, that's a very complicated question, and I'm gonna have to simplify, but sectors that are closer together are oftentimes going to have walls that obscure sectors that are farther away. And so you draw the closest ones first. If the processor drew this wall way back here, it would have to draw over it later and waste valuable processing time. As I touched on earlier, processors weren't powerful enough to handle drawing entire rooms, so you had to figure out solutions to this to ensure that the processor was only drawing what was absolutely necessary. So even though this seems complicated, it's a solution that's very easy on the processor, and it's an arguably better solution than the one that Wolfenstein used. Why? Well, Wolfenstein was married to its 2D setup. Every wall in Wolfenstein had to be the same exact height, because every column on screen was really just a representation of a pixel on this top-down map. This solution doesn't allow for variable wall size. Also, every wall in Wolfenstein had to be at right angles to one another due to this system. Everything was boxy because calculating walls at any other angle would be tough on the processor and slow down the game drastically. Doom, since it's not using raycasting and went with an entirely new system, was freed from these limitations. Walls can be different sizes, since instead of drawing vertical columns that represent pixels, the processor is hopping up and down a data tree and drawing different sectors. And because of this, you can apply different floor and ceiling heights to these sectors to create a variety of different room types without bogging down the processor. It's brilliant, it's sophisticated, but it's not actually 3D. These different floor and ceiling heights are just numbers in memory that tell the processor to draw something farther up or down the screen than it normally would. In memory, the processor is just thinking of everything as being in a 2D plane, but drawing it in such a way that it looks like it's calculating three-dimensional space. If it were actually calculating three-dimensional space, you would be able to stack rooms on top of one another, but you can't in Doom. Play all the way through Doom 1, and you'll never find a room that's actually stacked over another room, because that would mess with the top-down map that the processor is actually working with. This is also why, as I mentioned earlier, you can hit demons that are clearly above or below your line of fire, because they're not actually above or below you as far as the processor is concerned. They're just drawn at certain points on the screen to give you that illusion. This is also why you can't look up or down in the original Doom. This isn't a quirky game design choice. It's because it's actually just a 2D game that's faking 3D really, really hard. It wasn't until Quake came along that we got a true 3D game from id Software. You could look up and down. You could have rooms that were over top of other rooms. The entire 3D map in memory was being processed as a truly 3D environment. It has stairs! So get this. Their breakout hit game, Wolfenstein 3D, was released almost half a decade before their first actual 3D game. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Wolfenstein 3D or Doom are lesser games because of this. All of that stuff at the beginning about id Software lying and cheating, that was just me poking fun. If anything, this type of programming wizardry that fakes 3D is truly impressive, and the guys at id Software were geniuses. Binary space partitioning had been written about since the late 1960s, but it was John Carmack, the lead programmer at id, who implemented these ideas in Doom, and as a result, revolutionized gaming. And that's arguably not the most important thing he's done. The guy was given 2 Emmys for his work in computer technology, and he's spearheading Oculus today, which is no small task. I find it truly amazing that Doom and Wolfenstein 3D look like any other 3D game, even though, under the hood, they're both being computed exactly the same way as 2D top-down shooters are. And it's because of this that they were able to become so popular. This fake 3D was easy on processors, so you didn't need to go out and buy a beast supercomputer to run these games. Almost anybody could get a copy of Wolfenstein 3D or Doom and play it, and even so, these games still looked phenomenal at the time. Understanding how games are programmed and what's going on underneath the hood can give you insight into why certain design choices are being made, and being aware of a game's technological limitations can serve to heighten your respect for its designers and help you appreciate all the cool tricks and workarounds they had to do to make their game work. And it can also help contextualize games like Doom and Wolfenstein and explain why they were considered so revolutionary in their time. And clever cheats and workarounds like this are still being used today. Games are lying to you all the time. Developers still have to dance and design around limitations in order to give us the beautiful worlds and elegant mechanics we're so used to exploring. So the next time you sit down and play a game, give a little nod to the developers, who put in so much effort to make these playable worlds work. Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here. What's up with your face? Oh, you're probably noticing how I'm drawn with less stubble this time around. It's because Dollar Shave Club paid for this video, and your drawings too will have less stubble if you get one of these razors. No, but for real, I've actually used one of these razors in real life well before they even paid for this episode. A year ago, they sponsored an episode of Game Theory that I edited, and I needed to purchase one of their razors out of pocket just so I could capture high-quality screenshots of their purchase page to use during that sponsored segment. And so I just got their cheapest 2-bladed razor, and it actually ended up being one of the best razors I'd ever used. They're not asking me to say say this. This is actually a true story and a neat piece of game theory trivia. They are, however, asking me to say, go to dollarshaveclub.com/DNSQ. That's dollarshaveclub.com/DNSQ. Pro tip! You don't have to pay every single month. My hair doesn't grow that fast and I don't shave every single day, so a single packet of razors lasts me longer than a month. If you're like me, you can just pause your subscription periodically and then resume when you do start running low. They're not asking me to say this either. This is a serious pro tip coming off the top of my head right now. Seriously, try it. I actually do dig their razors and they paid for this episode, so without them, you wouldn't have this episode. Also, if you buy one of these razors and find that they aren't shaving, like, at all, then you've inserted the blade upside down. I may or may not know this from personal experience. What's this? 2 episodes of digressing and side questing in the same month? Is the world ending? Nope, I'm just getting paid to do this one. But I promise it's still a good episode. A while back, I had a video planned about the history of MMORPGs and how their mechanics evolved over time, but MatPat sort of beat me to it with an episode of Game Theory that covered a lot of the things I wanted to cover, so I spent the next 17 hours writing him a nasty email that I didn't send because I'm a wimp, and I wasn't necessarily mad at him per se. I just really wanted to make an episode about MMOs, and 80% of the stuff I wanted to say was already covered in that episode. So I crumpled up my MMO script and threw it in the trash can and forgot about the whole thing. That is, until an email hit my inbox. It was from En Masse Entertainment, and they said, "Hey Ronnie, would you be interested in being able to afford food next month?" And I said, "Yes, I'd be incredibly interested in being able to afford food next month." And so they said, "Great, make an episode of Digressing and Side Questing about MMO combat." And I said, "Combat! That's something that MatPat didn't cover! Ha! That's it!" And so I spent the next several weeks researching MMO and online combat, and now we have this video. So to talk about MMO combat, I actually need to talk about online combat in general. Online combat is actually a really difficult problem to solve. With a single player game, you're really only limited by your own computer. But in an online game, you have to negotiate between several different people with several different setups and internet speeds, all occupying the same play space. And you have to figure out some way to make the entire experience coherent and fluid for every user. The first online gaming was done peer-to-peer. So say there's 4 of us in a game, all of our computers would be directly connected and synchronized with each other. Everybody's computers were sharing information with everybody else's computers. So if you press W to move your character forward, that key press would also go to everybody else's machine. Their machines would calculate that, and once everybody's machine got the input and agreed that they got the input, then your character would move forward on everybody's machine. The problem with this setup is the game can only run as fast as the slowest connection, since every computer in the group is synchronized, and they all have to agree on who's inputting what and when. This worked great for local games or if everybody playing happened to have similar speeds, but if someone in the match were in another country, that single slow connection would result in everybody's game getting bogged down because their computers were constantly waiting on the slowpoke to agree on all the inputs and calculations. In slower paced games like internet poker, this isn't a huge problem, but in something like a fast paced FPS, the story is quite a bit different. The second setup that came about was client-server, where instead of being directly connected to each other, all 4 players would be directly connected to a central machine called the server. If you press W on your computer, your key press would get sent to the server would calculate and resolve everything, and once it finished, it would send the data to you and all the other players so all of you would see your character move forward. The advantage of this setup is if you have one slow player in the game, they're not slowing everybody else down. The disadvantage of this system is if you were the poor soul who had a slow connection, it could take half a second or more between when you press W and when your character would finally begin to move on everybody's screen. So you'd press the button, wait for the signal to go from your computer to your ISP, to the server would calculate it, confirm the input, and then send the signal to everybody else. And then finally your character would move. You're essentially a sitting duck unless you have a good connection to the server. On top of that, you also had to wait for the data from all the other players to reach you as well. If your connection wasn't fast, then everybody else might appear to be teleporting and zipping around you. You'd essentially be a stationary target that couldn't harm a fly, because everybody else is moving too fast. Unless you had a good connection, an online game using this system was completely unplayable. Id Software ran into this exact same problem when they first released Quake. People who had access to broadband internet had a blast playing it online right out the gate, but the vast majority of people who owned Quake in 1996 only had access to dial-up modems, and just couldn't play the game online because it was so choppy and slow. So Id Software decided to hunker down and figure out a way to solve this problem, and what they came up with revolutionized online gaming. It was called client-side prediction. The game would appear to play smooth on your screen even if things were getting choppy underneath the hood. Instead of having to wait on the server to confirm your input before it happened on screen, if you press W to move forward, your client still sent the message to the server, but before it even heard back from the server, your character would immediately start moving on your screen. Everybody else is still seeing where you were a moment ago, and they need to wait until the server gets your message and sends it off to them. But on your screen, all of your inputs are happening immediately. Conversely, you're seeing everybody else where they were a moment ago, and you need to wait on the server to update their positions on your screen, but on their screen, everything is happening right as they press their buttons. Everybody is universally on a slight delay relative to each other, short enough that it doesn't impact gameplay, but large enough that everybody's inputs have enough time to reach the server, get calculated, and get sent to everybody else playing. On the old setup, a player would send their data to the server, and they'd have to wait until the server got the data, calculated it, and sent it to everybody else playing before the player would see anything happen on their own screen. In this new setup, a player is still sending their data to the server, and the server is still calculating it and sending the data to everybody else, but the player doesn't have to wait until they hear back from the server. If they press W, they move immediately, and the players around them aren't zipping or teleporting because the server is sending the player a continuous stream of data about all the other players that the server already finished calculating moments ago. This means that even if you have a slow connection, you can still remain competitive and everything on your end appears to play smoothly. The old client-server setup was like you were riding on a train as the train tracks were being built. You ride the train to the end of the tracks, and then the server would have to feverishly work to make the next stretch of tracks, and you'd have to wait until it finished before you could continue onwards. And then you'd do it again. Ride the tracks to the end, stop and wait until the server finishes the next stretch of tracks before you could continue onwards, and repeat. With client-side prediction, the server has a head start on everything and has built a good chunk of the tracks ahead of you, so you can coast cleanly without having to worry about all the starts and stops. While this solves a lot of problems, it's not perfect. There are edge cases where, say, you're on a fast connection and you sprint behind a corner right as somebody with a slower connection shoots at you. On your screen, you're already around the corner, but on their screen, because of the delay, you haven't run around the corner yet, and they got a direct hit. What should happen here? Does the server register the hit and you get shot from around the corner? Or does the server register it as a miss and their bullet goes right through you? What most developers will do is they'll register it as a hit, and they might actually play a specific death animation that covers this discrepancy up a little bit. If you've ever seen the weird Call of Duty death animation where your character is running and suddenly their feet fly out from under them and they smack the ground flat on their back, that's what that is. This is an edge case and it rarely happens, but seeing your bullet pass right through somebody is easier to notice than being shot right as you turn a corner. This is also how kill cams work. They're always done from the shooter's perspective regardless of what the target saw on their screen. Another problem is popping. Maybe you've played an online game where in the middle of battle, you turn a corner into a clearing, fire a couple bullets, crouch, and then suddenly you're popped all the way back to before you ran around the corner, almost like you got sent back in time. That game was using client-side prediction, and your client, for whatever reason, got desynchronized from the server, and the server had to pop you back and correct your position relative to all the other players. This sort of stuff has actually been happening the entire time you've been playing the game. The server is constantly popping you and other people to slightly different positions, but it's usually not as dramatic unless there's a huge lag spike, and the server has to immediately fix something that went horribly, horribly wrong. You get these occasional pops, and sure, they're annoying, but 99% of your playtime looks fast and fluid. The solution worked great for FPSs and other games, but historically it hasn't been available to MMOs, because MMOs introduce a whole new set of problems, namely because of that first M, massive. Instead of supporting 20 players for a 10-on-10 deathmatch, an MMO server needs to keep track of thousands of players all doing anything from fighting to gathering to trading to crafting all at once. Fast-paced active combat wasn't a viable option for MMOs due to the sheer number of people occupying their servers, so they had to deliberately make their combat systems less active. This is why, for a very long time, combat in things like WoW are hotbar and numbers-based rather than being twitch and reflex-based. The technology just didn't allow for smooth and real-time combat across the entire server. That's not to say that less active combat systems are necessarily worse. It's just that less active combat was literally the only option available for massive multiplayer games. But that's starting to change. Newer MMOs are starting to feature play spaces that favor much more active systems, where instead of melee range and miss rates, you have hitboxes and enemies that physically dodge your attacks in real time. Technology has gotten to the point where active combat is becoming a viable option for MMOs, and it's really exciting, and the sorts of adjustments and tweaks designers have to make to the usual MMO formula when they implement an active combat system like this is fascinating. Terra, for instance, and I'm gonna have to use Terra for instance because it's the one I'm most familiar with since I spent the last month playing it because they paid me. But Terra, for instance, I honestly didn't understand a bunch of the design choices Terra made when I first started the game. Why do I have separate resolve and mana bars as a warrior? Why does my resolve bar drain so quickly when I dodge? Why can't most of these healing items be used in combat? Why do the healing items that can be used in combat take an entire 60 seconds to cool down? A lot of it was baffling until I was around level 20 trying to take out a basilisk on my own, and suddenly a bunch of their design decisions made sense. Defensive skills like dodging and blocking use up resolve, while offensive skills refill resolve but use up mana. So combat becomes a balancing act of trying to manage these two resources while also dealing damage and not getting hit. Enemies have tells, so you know when and where to dodge, but you don't want to overuse your dodge because you might end up with an empty resolve bar, and won't be able to roll out of the way when you really need to. And you don't want to overuse your offensive skills either because you might end up with 0 MP when a great opportunity to deal damage comes up. Healing items in Terra have a long cooldown time, so you can't lean on them as a crutch. It's really up to you to dodge, block, and pick your shots strategically when you're facing down an enemy. Managing hit points and mana, stepping into a rhythm of offense and defense, keeping track of the area around you so you don't accidentally corner yourself. Fights can get really cool when you're up against a strong enough enemy. And other classes play entirely differently, ranging from support priests to glass cannon sorcerers to whatever this is. While previous MMOs definitely required skill, and you needed to pick your shots and use certain skills at certain times, in Terra, that stuff is happening at a much more rapid clip, and so it feels more like an action game. The best way I can put it is that in something like WoW, it comes down to timing, while in Terra, it comes down to reflexes, and it's a weird brain shift you have to make when you're exploring the game. It's impressive that they were able to pull off a system like this considering the sort of networking hurdles you need to jump over in order to make a play space like this possible. Active combat is a step in a very interesting direction for MMOs, and now that it's becoming viable, I can't wait to see more. Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here. If you liked the video, you can watch more here. Just click on the eye thingy. But also, if you didn't like the video, because I got paid to do it, then you can check out Game Theory. You probably don't like me anymore.
Resident Evil? Call of Duty? Fighting games? Giant robots? What could all these games possibly have in common?
Absolutely nothing at all, but that's not gonna stop me. The game I really want to talk about today is Armored Core 3 because it's freaking awesome. But I know only about 3 of you have ever played Armored Core 3, or any Armored Core game for that matter, so I'm going to use a bunch of other, more popular games to compare it against. These comparisons won't be exact and won't necessarily be fair, but they'll help get my ideas across. So what is Armored Core 3? Well, it's a customizable giant robot fighting game, which is just awesome. You pilot a giant mech that you can endlessly customize to fit your own personal playstyle and tastes. You can customize its head, arms,
Legs, torso, generator, radiator, paint job, weapon loadout, HUD layout.
You can even personalize your mech with your own neat little logo, which is really fun. It has great mechanics, an interesting universe, and loads of subtle storytelling, and it interleaves all of these different elements in a surprisingly consistent way.
When are we going to talk about Call of Duty and Resident Evil?
I was just about to get there. Mechanically, Armored Core 3 is a third-person shooter, like Resident Evil, kinda. One thing that turns many players off of the Resident Evil series is that you can't move and shoot at the same time. For some players, these turret controls completely break the immersion. Jill Valentine is a former Army, now Special Tactics and Rescue Officer, and you're telling me that she can't at least take a couple steps back while aiming? Come on! Now mechanically, not allowing the player to move is a good idea for this game. It creates tension and urgency and forces the player to make unique decisions moment to moment as they play, all of which is wonderful for a horror game. The entire game is designed around you not being able to move while you're aiming. It makes total sense mechanically, but aesthetically, many players find it a little ridiculous. Some players can't suspend their disbelief about this situation, so it breaks the immersion. Instead of being a vehicle to heighten the experience, it becomes a hurdle many players have to jump over before they can enjoy the game. To some people, this sort of thing doesn't matter at all, but to other people, it's make or break. Armored Core 3 does something similar. You can buy these incredibly powerful back-mounted weapons that can devastate opponents in only a handful of shots. But to keep these weapons from being totally overpowered, you can't move while you're aiming them. And the aesthetic of the game tries really hard to sell this idea to you. These guns just look massive. And when you activate them, they fold out over your mech's shoulder, altering your mech's center of gravity. Of course your mech wouldn't be able to move when you activate this weapon. Not being able to move is a choice purely informed by the mechanics, but they use the aesthetics to dress up the choice in a way that players will hopefully be able to buy into, and maintain their suspension of disbelief. As I said, this choice in Resident Evil is mechanically sound, but it just doesn't do a lot to try to sell you this choice in-universe. While in Armored Core, it's both mechanically sound while also doing its best to make sense in-universe. Alright, next on our list of weird comparisons is Call of Duty 4. COD 4 in its time was lauded for its multiplayer, which introduced an experience system that allowed you not only to unlock new weapons, but also gain access to skills called perks. You could combine all of these weapons and skills into various loadouts to match with your personal playstyle. If you liked using guns that had a massive damage output, but slow reload time, you might want to combine that with a skill that cut your reload time in half. If you preferred sitting back and sniping, instead of getting up close and storming rooms, then flashbangs were useless to you, so it's better instead to go with these landmines that you can plant at the entrance to your campsite to keep people from sneaking up on you while you're busy looking down your scope. It was a wonderful system, and the developers worked really hard to keep things balanced. Choosing something always meant giving up something else, so you were constantly weighing the pros and cons of your choices. Flashbangs or landmines, more damage or more hit points? weapons. In the universe of COD 4, there's no real reason why a soldier logically couldn't carry both flashbangs and landmines. Heck, many of them can sprint with rocket launchers strapped to their back. Making the player choose one over the other is a purely mechanical decision, and it's a great design decision. However, they don't do much to sell this idea in universe. They keep it purely mechanical, and that's that. Armored Core 3 did a similar thing years earlier, with all of its various parts and weapon combinations. You could mix and match parts and weapons in whatever loadout best complemented your personal playstyle. And just like in Call of Duty, picking one thing meant sacrificing something else. You can build a mech that has tons of armor and can soak up tons of damage, but armor is really heavy, so only certain legs are actually built to bear that much weight without causing problems. And these legs are, understandably, not the most mobile. On the flip side, if you value more mobile leg types, like hover legs, then you're going to have trouble when it comes to carrying heavy guns or heavy armor. If you're a player who likes using energy weapons, then you're going to need a heavy-duty generator that can output a lot of energy. Hey, remember when I talked about not being able to move and aim while using those powerful back-mounted weapons? Well, if you decide to equip your mech with quadruped or tank legs, which are much more stable, you can move while aiming these large shoulder-mounted weapons, which makes sense aesthetically and also serves to balance these parts out within the game's mechanics. Once again, COD 4 did a great job of keeping the game balanced, but it fell a little flat when it came to grounding these choices within its own universe. Whereas in Armored Core 3, the developers not only managed to make such a hugely customizable game balanced, but they also used in-universe concepts like weight limits or energy drain to help ground their balancing choices within the game's universe. Now, as I said in the opening, I'm aware these two things aren't an exact one-to-one comparison. I'm just using them to help get a point across. Okay, next up on the weird comparison list is fighting games. This one is probably the most out there, so I'm gonna need you to bear with me. A lot of fighting games keep their central campaign in one box, and their arcade mode in another box. In most modern Mortal Kombats, you have a central campaign that does most of the world building, and then off to the side you have an arcade mode tower, where you battle your way to the top and then get a little bit of story at the end. A lot of the Soul Caliburs are also that way. Central campaign over here, arcade mode tower with a little bit of story at the end over here. KOF's done similar things, Tekken's done similar things, Virtua Fighter's done similar things. There's quite a few examples out there. Armored Core 3 also has a similar setup, where you have a central campaign that involves intrigue, gaining faction with various entities, branching pathways, secret items, the works. And then on the side you have a neat arena mode, where you can face other pilots one-on-one. It's essentially the same tower setup, where the object is to battle your way to the top. But the unique thing that Armored Core 3 does is that it uses its arena mode to also world build. Instead of just doing the usual tiny amount of story and world building only at the end once you beat it, like many other games do. Every pilot you face in the arena has a short little bio that you can read, and these bios really help to inform the player about the universe this game takes place in, and the kind of people that inhabit this universe. Not only did the developers write a bio for every one of the 71 arena opponents in this game, but they also created a custom emblem for each pilot, as well as a fully painted and designed mech, just like the one you pilot. One pilot's bio mentions that he used to be a street racer before he became a pilot, and if you look at his custom emblem, you can see it reflects his past. Some bios say things like, this pilot enjoys close range combat, and sure enough, you'll find that the developers tuned that pilot's AI to do just that, try to fight you at close range. This pilot has a mech that's green on one half, purple on the other, and his custom emblem reflects that motif. Many of these pilots that you see in the arena can also show up in the central campaign. They might be working with you, or working against you, so it's not uncommon to end up in a life or death battle against them. And if you do kill them, they actually disappear from the arena roster. It's really subtly done, and a lot of players don't realize it, but it makes what you do in the central campaign and what you do in the arena cross over in great ways, and it makes the universe feel that much more consistent. You don't often find this sort of cross-pollination in other games, where the campaign modes and arcade modes are kept in totally separate boxes.
Well, you know, that's not really a fair comparison to draw.
Yes, I know. Please refer back to all of the different points in this episode where I already said that some of these comparisons won't necessarily be fair. I'm just using these other games to give you context into how neat this one is, and to talk about different design concepts. So many games just have their mechanics in one box, and their storytelling and aesthetics in another box. In games, it's not uncommon to watch characters perform crazy stunts in cutscenes that they can't do in game, or see a character get killed off permanently due to a stab wound in a cutscene, when in game they've literally taken dozens of Gatling gun bullets to the face without even needing to heal afterwards. As gamers, we've grown somewhat used to these discordancies and take them as a given. When games do things that make their mechanics and aesthetics resonate with their storytelling, and make everything consistent across the entire play space, it often goes unnoticed. I'm not saying that every element in every game needs to harmonize like this or else it's bad. I'd say games like Call of Duty and any of the fighting games I've featured are actually totally okay, because seamless immersion isn't actually a huge part of their draw. What I am saying is that certain types of games do exist that are centered around player immersion, and certain mechanical choices can negatively impact this sense of immersion.
and in the past, designers haven't been mindful enough of this fact. If you're designing a horror game and genuinely want to scare players, you're taking a big risk by using a mechanic that presents an obvious barrier to that immersion. If you've ever played a game that many people love and you can't seem to get into, it might just be that one or more of its aspects are creating some sort of discordance. While on the flip side, certain harmonies, when they do show up in some games, can really draw you into a game and heighten your appreciation of it. Armored Core 3 is one of those games that have so many great harmonies between all of its different parts, and it's a shame more people haven't played it. Heck, I had to bend over backwards to figure out how to compare this game to other more popular games, because there's very few games quite like it, and I wanted to talk about it so badly. Just go out and play it. It's a great time, I swear. Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here. If you like the video, then you can check out some of my other videos here. I have like a Tetris one, and like a Zelda one, and I made a Pokemon one. A lot of people like the Pokemon one. But a lot of people also don't really like me, so you can watch Game Theory here. That's what if you like Matt Pat better.
People from all walks of life find themselves magnetized to this game. Parents, children, businessmen, school teachers, even Steve Wozniak was a huge Tetris maniac back in the day, so much so that he was featured in Nintendo Power. He actually topped the high score charts for so long that they just stopped accepting his scores. So as a joke, he started spelling his name backwards when he sent his scores in to see if they'd publish it. They did. What are some of the big factors that make Tetris so compelling, and are there any factors that often go overlooked? What secrets do these blocks hold, and how do we unlock them? Since Tetris has been ported to every system, phone, and egg beater imaginable, it's hard to speak to every single version of the game. So one or two of the things I cover might not apply as well to certain versions as it does others. However, most of these concepts I point out will carry over, but do give me some wiggle room. So an ordinary round of Tetris follows a pretty predictable arc. Each new game starts out slow and tranquil. You got this. But it quite literally begins to gain speed and you have to keep up with it. What begins as a slow and soothing exercise that enables obsessive compulsive behavior soon becomes a frantic and frenetic match of five-finger fillet. Blah! That's quite a contrast, and there's so much pressure and suspense at the end of the game because you've been working at this task for a while. You've become invested, so when the speed finally sneaks up on you, you actually feel like you have something to lose. This game makes ordinary people like you and me become emotionally invested in tessellated stacks of squares. That's ridiculous. And it makes a good one tastafobulous. What helps us along is that its execution barrier is almost always exactly where it needs to be because it increases proportionally and dynamically to your skill level.
Was that even English?
The only time its difficulty amps up is when you do well enough to make it amp up. It's perpetually just difficult enough. In a well-designed port of Tetris, you're not suddenly thrown a stupid spike in difficulty or it doesn't stay too easy for too long. The difficulty curve is a gradual slope, and sometimes before you know it, you find you've climbed further up the slope than you ever thought possible. And once you've climbed that slope, you often find that a game over doesn't necessarily equate to failure in this game. Even the very best Tetris players in the world eventually game over. It's not about hitting a mark or getting to the end of a level, it's about finding and surpassing your own limits. Once you finally get to level 20, you don't sit down and pop a brewski. You giggle to yourself and try to get to level 21, right? And the next time you play, the experience is a little bit different. And not only is your experience different from play session to play session, but as I mentioned earlier, a single play session drastically changes in dynamic over the course of one sitting due to the game speeding up. This can actually have a huge effect on the choices a player might make moment to moment as they play the game. As an example, here's one strategy that intermediate Tetris addicts often employ. The game gets more difficult with the more lines you clear, so you want to get the most points out of the fewest lines. Since you're awarded point bonuses per line you clear at once, this piece becomes the most valuable since it's the only one that can clear 4 rows at once and give you the maximum point bonus. A Tetris. So that means to maximize your score and minimize the speed of the game, you're going to want to try to set up situations where you can clear 4 lines at a time. Ideally, getting a Tetris would be the only way you would ever want to score ever in order to get the maximum amount of points before the game gets too fast for you. But as the speed of the game increases, setting up these situations becomes a far more difficult challenge. So players often shift their strategy and only go for 1 or 2 rows at a time when they feel the game is finally getting too fast for them. Even though this yields less points per line, it's much easier to manage at higher speeds, and it makes mistakes and mishaps much less devastating. So shifting to a less powerful strategy on paper is often better in the long run when you account for the player's current skill level. And the point at which players make this shift varies. As a player gets better and better, the shifting point is pushed back farther and farther. However, the shifting point is also affected by the player's previous missteps. At speed level 6, the board might look like this, or it could look like this. So even if this is the same player playing at the same speed level, the point at which they make the shift in strategy is affected by the current landscape. And the landscape is based on the player's previous successes and mistakes. It's actually a super interesting choice to have to make as a player. Should I fall back now, or am I feeling confident enough in my ability to keep pressing onward and going for 4 lines at a time? And this strategic shift is not the only interesting or complex choice that the game might ask the player to make. Even placing a single piece can become a multifaceted and complex question, where there sometimes isn't an obvious right answer. The optimal spot to place a piece is affected by the current speed of the game, and it's also affected by the piece that's coming up next, and it's also affected by the player's current skill level. It's a far more complex problem-solving challenge than most people realize. And whether consciously or unconsciously, a good player parses through all these ends of the question before they make their decision and slot the block into place. And then they have to do the whole thing again when the next block appears. And now a bunch of these factors are different as a result of their previous move. It's cool, isn't it? Tetris is also a rare example where a player's mistakes actually make the game even more interesting. I touched on this before, but mistakes in Tetris have a habit of compounding and building on top of each other. Not only does a mistake affect a player in the moment, but unless they mop it up quickly, it'll stay there and affect them down the road. Leaving a bunch of junk on screen can make later levels much more difficult. And for most players, making a mistake and then recovering from it is often a very difficult task, because what needs to be done in order to recover is not always obvious. And you don't know what pieces you're going to be given down the road, so it's a super dynamic problem-solving task. The exact same mistake under the exact same conditions can affect 2 players in entirely different ways. For some players, a mistake like this is a death blow and they won't ever be able to recover from it. But for a more skilled player, this isn't so bad. They can fix it and still go on to see another 8 lines. And even though a better player will be able to mop up their mistakes more efficiently, a better player will also make less mistakes, period, and spend less time mopping up, which means that later levels have less junk on screen, which allows a better player to go even further. Improving one part of your Tetris skill set sort of recombines and reinforces all those other parts of your skill set. And then once a player gets really good, there are certain advanced things that players pick up. Sometimes advanced players start stacking their pieces in a fashion that seems really odd or just wrong to lower level players. But the advanced players are just looking farther ahead. They're setting up combinations that just aren't obvious to lower level players. And advanced players can also learn things like the T-spin or the L-spin. They intentionally create odd overhangs that they can clear out by rotating a piece at the last possible moment to slot it into place. Seriously, watching advanced people play is almost superhuman. Tetris is all about topping yourself and improving your score, and improvement at Tetris is a multifaceted endeavor. Not only does it mean learning better piece placement in order to set up Tetris opportunities, but it also means making fewer mistakes, and becoming better at mopping up the mistakes you do make. It means learning to look ahead at the next piece and learning to set up combinations. Learning how to exploit the mechanics of piece spinning. The more you learn, the more complex your decision-making process becomes. So learning how to keep up at higher speeds means learning how to make these increasingly complex decisions even faster. It all creates a perfect storm for interesting player improvement. Even though it's a very accessible game, there is secretly a ton of depth that can be explored. Its simple rule set gives way to a bunch of emergent properties and strategies. It's very similar to games like chess and Go in that respect. It's a neat game that's constantly asking the player to tackle new and interesting problems, and even improving at the game is an interesting problem in and of itself. So the next time you find yourself clearing a few lines before work, don't feel guilty. This game's a freaking masterpiece, dude.
Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here. Who? You can check out some of my videos here, or maybe you hate me and want to watch some game theory. Oh, but I help out with that show too, so there's no escaping me. You know, I used to think your show was just mediocre because of the intro. Now I know it's just mediocre. Hey. That's not nice.
So if you attended the Overthinking It panel at SGC, you'd know that Zelda 1 is my absolute favorite from the series. And in fact, it's really the only one from the franchise that I can just pop in and play at any given moment and enjoy no matter what. Which is funny, because when I was in elementary school, I totally despised it. Today it's hailed as a flawed masterpiece, as a prototype that would give way to much better games that would come much later. But what if I told you that it's not as flawed as you might think, and that the children it sired aren't as cherub-faced as you've come to believe? Wait, so I'm comparing 2 titles from the same franchise in this episode? Wow, this show really is a low-rent sequelitis ripoff. So Zelda 1 has its problems. Really big problems that are stupid and silly and need to be fed dog food in the attic because they can't be shown in public. The translation is bogus, some of the puzzles are downright stupid, and Heil Hitler. Even so, it still makes a lot of cool design choices, even if the execution isn't spot on. Zelda 1 is all about exploration, and it bends over backwards to reinforce and reward a player for their exploration. From the get-go, you're just dropped into the middle of the map without any instruction, and the only way to learn about the game is through exploration. You'll probably wander around aimlessly and get your butt handed to you, but that's fine. The game balances its lack of direction by lowering its penalty for death. The game desperately doesn't want the player to be too afraid to explore uncharted territory, so dying 15 times in a row in the same dungeon isn't a terribly huge deal. You have infinite lives, so losing your shield to a like is actually more frustrating than dying is. Every Zelda game since has pretty much taken this concept as a given. Well, except for Zelda 2.
I want to like you, but you're so stupid.
Hey, I like Zelda too.
No, you're just stupid. Now, a bunch of designers argue that if you're going to demand a player to explore, it's usually not a bad idea to periodically reward the player with cool discoveries. You want to get the player saying to themselves, good things happen when I explore, so I want to explore more. Zelda 1 nails this with the amount of secrets it packs into its overworld. Believe it or not, on average, over 1/3 of the 128 overworld screens in this game hides an optional secret. That's ridiculous for an 8-bit title. Now, most players will never find most of those, but there's just so many out there that they are bound to find a few, which will make them want to look for more. Another neat thing that reinforces exploration is that you can actually get the white sword, magic shield, and blue ring all before you ever set foot inside a single dungeon. No cheats, no glitches, just simply playing the game as it is right out of the box. Could you imagine rocking your second sword, tunic, and shield all before you complete your first dungeon in a Zelda game today? That'd be so weird and rad, right? And if you're feeling quite surly after getting these 3 items, you can actually demolish Dungeon 2 before you ever stumble across Dungeon 1. What's that? You can't seem to find Dungeon 2? Yeah, neither could I on my first time through. No problem though, because the game will let you beat Dungeons 3 through 8 without ever having to blink an eye at 2. Oh, and if you want to do it that way, you should probably do Dungeon 6 after you do 7 and 8, because 6 is like the hardest freaking one. Seriously, I actually know people that just gave up on doing 6 their first time through the game, and went on their merry way beating 7 and 8 before going back to Dungeon 6. I was one of those people. This game is designed to allow for that much non-linearity. It's freaking sweet! And it's in an 8-bit title! What? At the start of the game, you're just dropped into the middle of the map with no instruction. It's up to you to decide where to go, what to do, and when to do it. It's okay if you discover the dungeons out of order. It's fine if you want to do half of Dungeon 2 before hopping back to beat 1. Or if you want to complete 4 and 5 before finally going back and beating Dungeon 2. It all reinforces that central concept of exploration. And that's not all. Another thing that reinforces and encourages the whole idea of aimless exploration is that they don't really even give you a map. This layout in the upper left-hand corner gives you a general idea of where you are in the landscape, but it doesn't show you where anything else is. It's up to you to find the landmarks and take note of them. A bunch of people made hand-drawn maps on graph paper back in the day, which is pretty sweet, but it's actually not that hard to make an accurate mental map of everything. Hyrule might seem like a super big and scary place at first, but after some hardy adventuring and this little icon giving you a general idea of where you are, it won't be long before you begin to intuit the bigger picture and get a sense of where you have and haven't been. You simply get better at navigating the game as you play it. What a novel concept! And it's actually kind of fun to go from being a scared little guy with a wooden sword who knows absolutely nothing about the world map, to being a raft-riding, boomerang-throwing, periwinkle tunic-wearing adventurer, able to navigate your way across all corners of the globe like a total stud muffin. Yep, I can find my way through the Lost Woods. That's a turn on, right? Yeah, you like that? While Zelda 1 did everything in its power from the get-go to let the player know that it's okay to just explore and do things out of order, A Link to the Past takes a much different tack. From the start, it plays and appears incredibly linear, and you're not allowed to really explore much of the overworld until you rescue Zelda from the dungeon. After which point your map, I forgot to mention, this game also gives you a pretty large detailed Mode 7 map, so no need for you to explore and create your own mental one, because this game's got that covered. Anyway, so after you rescue Zelda, your map is marked with all the places that you need to go. You're supposed to talk to this old hag in the village, so X marks the spot. You're supposed to talk to this old fop in a cave, so X marks the spot. You're supposed to get these pendants from the bosses of the first 3 dungeons, so let's just mark their exact location with 3 large Mode 7 pendant icons on your large Mode 7 map. Hey, but they're all marked on my map at the same time. Maybe that means I can enter and complete them out of order. No, not really. I mean, you can do like 75% of a dungeon and get the treasure and then exit it, but once you're already that far into a large multi-tiered dungeon, it's not all that advantageous to exit unless you're restocking potions. So after a few hours of a much more linear and streamlined quest, you get to the Dark World, and you have to beat the current dungeon before it shows you the location of the next. And after having to do everything up to this point in order, a player can reasonably deduce that you have to do these numbered Dark World dungeons in order as well. But no! Now for some reason, a third of the way through the game, A Link to the Past is finally letting you explore and do dungeons out of order, which would be rad, except it gives you every indication that you're still largely stuck on a linear track. And they even number the Dark World dungeons. Zelda, baby, you're giving me mixed messages. You shouldn't do that to a player.
Don't speak in Ebonics ever again.
Well, it's not a terribly huge deal, and I'm one of the only 3 losers in the world who really care about any of this. You can see that A Link to the Past's design choices are quite a bit different from those of Zelda 1's. And in some cases, it can be argued that some of A Link to the Past's design choices conflict with each other. Right? Please don't hate me.
I hate you.
And another thing, in Zelda 1, most of the time if you were stuck, exploring would fix that problem right quick. In A Link to the Past though, there's no need for that silly exploration business. What is this, the 1980s? Just go to a fortune teller and drop a few rubies, you schmuck. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do or where to go without any ambiguity. Wait, what? A hint system in a Zelda game? That solves a bunch of the puzzles for you?
Wasn't the internet up in arms about this sort of thing being in the Ocarina of Time remake? But they conveniently forgot about the fortune and storytellers who provide a much similar service in this game? Seriously, I'm not stretching on this point. These guys do pretty much all the heavy lifting for you when it comes to solving the Book of Majora, Giant Bomb, Mushroom Zora, Moon Pearl, Agony, Well Chest, Blacksmith, and Graveyard puzzles in this game. Why were the Sheikah Stones Satan, but the fortune tellers cool? Internet, I just don't get you. Goatsy. Zelda 1 also offered hints, which is probably where A Link to the Past got this idea. In Zelda 1, however, they were one of the many things that rewarded exploration, while in A Link to the Past it seems like the hints are in place to avoid exploration. If you don't really want to invest time into aimlessly exploring and finding things, you can just throw some rubies at these guys and they might throw you a bone back. Now, I'm not saying this is bad. In fact, I'm totally fine with there being a hint system in a game like this, but it's really obvious that these two games place value and emphasis on different things. Even Miyamoto himself talked about this. Regarding Zelda 1's development, he once said this: "We started to work on The Legend of Zelda at the same time as Super Mario Bros. And since the same teams did both games, we tried to separate the different ideas. Super Mario Bros. Should be linear. The Legend of Zelda should be the total opposite." But you can see that the design philosophy of the series had drastically shifted as early as 1992. When being interviewed about A Link to the Past, Miyamoto said, "We've actually tried to make it as easy as possible. The way the game is structured, you can't take alternative routes to finish the game. If mainstream games players could cope with less linear adventures though, we might have made it a lot harder." The Zelda series went from being opaque, open world, and cryptic to being very accessible, linear, and streamlined. A Link to the Past takes a very start-to-finish approach, while Zelda 1 is more like you're in the center working your way outward. They employ two different design philosophies, and one is not inherently superior to the other. But much like Zelda 1, A Link to the Past seems a little bit confused at times. A Link to the Past rewards exploration, but it also rewards not exploration. It's linear for a while until it's not, and it doesn't tell you when. You can explore, but a lot of the cool landmarks are kinda given away because map.
A Link to the Past is a freaking masterpiece! You have no idea what you're talking about!
I'm not saying you're not allowed to like Link to the Past, and I'm not saying A Link to the Past is terrible. It does a lot of cool things, it's just a few of these cool things arguably conflict with each other. And I'm not saying A Link to the Past should be more like Zelda 1. That'd actually be stupid. Most people hate Zelda 1. And I can't blame them. Zelda 1 is really stupid at times, but I still love it. What I'm saying is, Zelda 1 perhaps gets a little bit too much flack sometimes, and A Link to the Past isn't scrutinized as much as it perhaps should be.
It had fun! It's true!
While we've seen Nintendo take A Link to the Past design ideas to all sorts of different places, even into the 3D realm, a lot of Zelda 1's ideas have really fallen by the wayside. In some ways, Link's Awakening is actually the closest we've gotten to a true successor to the first game. What with its different map system that kept everything hidden until after you'd explored that screen, the way it innovated and improved these side-scrolling segments with puzzles and rudimentary platforming, the fact that it hid these 26 seashells all over the world map that incentivized exploration in much the same way that the secrets in the first game did. It also put its own spin on Zelda 1's stopwatch power-up, with these temporary attack and defense boosts that enemies drop. Oh, and it also kept in the whole thing where you can pick up dropped items and rubies with your sword, like in the first game. Why didn't Link to the Past have this? It's so much fun! Even so, I'd still say that Link's Awakening feels like it's much more closely related to A Link to the Past than it is Zelda 1. A lot of people argue that if you were to hand the very first Zelda game to a designer today, and tell them to make a sequel based only on that one game from the franchise, it'd probably look less like a post-80s Zelda title and more like Minecraft or Dark Souls. And I don't disagree with that sentiment. That being said, if Nintendo were to rush out and make a Zelda game like that, it'd be a stupid idea. Because as I said, nobody likes the first Zelda game, everybody loves A Link to the Past, Miyamoto is Jesus, and Sakurai is the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here.
My ostriches are having babies!
Okay. So I guess there are like two other guys that also do videos on this channel. You might want to check their stuff out. Specifically this one about how Zelda's official timeline is wrong. I don't know, I don't watch it. YouTube videos are stupid.
It had fun! It's true!
In case you haven't noticed, Earthbound has garnered a fairly strong fan base over the years. I mean, you have Zelda fans, or you have Shenmue fans, but Earthbound fans tend to be pretty devoted. Like, really, really devoted. We're talking about a fan base that organized an internet-wide petition that got over 30,000 unique signatures in less than a year. Mind you, this was in 2002. There are like more people on Facebook today than there were people who had internet in 2002. You don't mess with mother fans. Unless you're Nintendo. What is it about this game that makes people fall so madly in love with it? While I won't even pretend to have all the answers, I do have most of them. Before I dive in, I need to get a couple things out of the way. One, this isn't necessarily a review of the game, it's more of an analysis of certain aspects of it. So I'm not going to summarize the plot, and aside from any in-game footage you see on screen, I'm going to keep significant plot spoilers to an absolute minimum. So no worries for those of you who haven't played the game. You monsters. 2. Moving forward, I ask that you keep in mind that I'm not going to be looking at Earthbound as just any RPG, I'm looking at it as a 90s RPG on the SNES. Design sensibilities about video game RPGs have changed quite a bit through the decades. If you want a perfect example of this, just take a look at how Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest have changed through the years. RPGs were in a very specific place at this point in time. Okay, let's move on to the actual episode, shall we?
That preface was unnecessary and boring.
One of the aspects of Earthbound that many a player adores is its personality. This game is filled to the brim with personality, which is one of the many reasons why it holds up so darn well even to this day, and it continues to gain new fans, including me. My first time playing through this game front to back was last January, and I'm a cynical, smarmy son of a snail, and now look, I'm a fully fledged fuzzy pitbull. Don't read too far into that. Really though, personality is a huge ingredient in what makes this game so phenomenal, in ways that a lot of players don't even notice. This element alone fixes a few design hangups RPGs have. It makes the universe more consistent, which is very important in an RPG. And it actually allows for the writing to be better, more nuanced, and subtle than a lot of other games at the time.
This game's personality is really that important? Dude, I think you're just blowing smoke out of your ass.
Here, let me paint you a picture. You're in an RPG, and you've just arrived at a new town. You've already saved, and you're not sure where to go next. What do? Kill yourself? You talk to every single solitary person in that new town. 9 times out of 10, they just say something really stupid and waste your time. It's like the game was giving you busy work.
Yes, Miss Squaresoft, I turned in my homework. Can I play the fracking game now?
This is one of those hangups that almost every console RPG at the time seemed to have, and most players just gritted their teeth and expected it as part of the package. Earthbound, however, eliminated any need for this tooth-gritting behavior. How? With its
magical personality.
The writing in this game is just bursting with it. It all just has such a quirky and playful sense of humor about it, it almost makes you want to talk to everybody in a new town, just to see what sort of silly stuff will spill out of their mouths. What in some games is mindless busywork becomes one of the core reasons why players enjoy this game, all due to the sheer strength of personality that the writing carries. The reason why the writing in this game is so strong was that it was all carefully handcrafted over 5 years by the game's producer and director, Shigesato Itoi. Itoi is a multi-talented writing ubermensch who became a celebrity in Japan during the 80s, and one way or another ended up spending well over a decade producing, writing, and directing video games with Nintendo over the years. Even Miyamoto himself has gone on record saying that he sometimes takes writing advice from this guy. But we'll get back to this shining paragon of a human being later. The town NPCs aren't the only part of this game that greatly benefited from the quirky writing. The enemies did too. They had ridiculous names and attacks that were thrown in there for the sake of humor. It can really turn what would be hours of mindless battles into funny little stints, like when a crow steals a cookie from your inventory, gorges himself on it, and then becomes far too happy with himself to attack you anymore. 1, that's actually an interesting design idea. 2, that's just ridiculous. Aside from the writing, the music and aesthetics also do a lot to help strengthen this game's sense of personality. A quarter of the space on the game's cartridge was taken up by the music alone, a whopping 8 megabits. Ugh. For some perspective, there were entire SNES games on store shelves at the time that used less space than this game's music, but those megabits were not ill-spent because the music is great. Even a lot of enemies have their own theme songs, and I'm not just talking bosses. You'll get into fights with insignificant overworld enemies that have their very own motif. It sounds like a tiny detail, but it goes miles towards giving each kind of fight its own flavor independent of the raw mechanics, and it pushes that sense of personality to the forefront. Also, the color palettes that were chosen for each town go a long way towards establishing the tone and feel of each area, and if you couple these beautiful palettes with some absolutely stunning music, you can tell that these places weren't just slapped together in an afternoon. These elements were carefully handcrafted and pulled freshly out of the oven just like Grandma used to make. Sure, other RPGs at the time did things just like this, and it helped to give them their own style and personality too. The thing about Earthbound is that all these disparate elements were unified and defined by the personality. It's an ever-pervasive element that almost mystically glues everything in the game together in a way that makes sense within the game's universe. It's just amazing good anomatastifulbulous. Yeah, that's a good word. Great job, Ronnie. Thanks. Most SNES RPGs in the 90s took their plot very seriously. Almost too seriously at times. Sure, they might have silly moments every once in a while to lighten the tense tone, but the overall mood of the game would be all business. Now, Earthbound, as I've illustrated in bright fluorescent ink, is the polar opposite. In fact, it's almost a satire of what other RPGs were doing at the time. Seriously, this stuff is like high art. Well, maybe not so much. But it is just so loony and nutty and absurd. It's not afraid to get meta or hang lampshades, and it's so much better for it. This game is in on the joke. So much so that you kind of begin to fall in love with it and embrace it. Its lovely colors, its cute buildings, its funny dialogue, and then, in the midst of all the silliness, it will hit you upside the face with a heaping dose of serious. You will cringe,
You will cry, and you will never know when to expect it. Believe it or not, this game goes to dark places and raises uncomfortable questions. But the scariest part is, the game never lingers on it. It will yank you down a dark road for 20 seconds and then go right back into happy zany fun land. Yay! Even though the game moves on, you'll sometimes find yourself stuck, mulling over a small sentence with something you see so. And this game can be really, really subtle about it. That's just good craftsmanship. You have games today that are struggling with gaining a player's empathy. Earthbound almost effortlessly takes that empathy and plays tiddlywinks with it. And that's another thing, actually. It's incredibly easy to relate with the characters in Earthbound. Most hardships or struggles that arose in the narrative of other RPGs at the time were very relevant to the in-game characters, but not so much to the player holding the controller. What I mean is, it's hard to personally feel sorry for Kane Highwind when he gets poisoned or petrified in battle. I mean, if you think about it, that would totally suck, to get poisoned or petrified in real life, but most fans of Final Fantasy probably don't think about status effects in that way, because the games don't really expect you to. But when Ness is trying to find his way out of a dark cave and starts feeling homesick, because he wants nothing more in the world right now than to hear his mother's voice over the phone, because he really, really misses her, I mean, that's something that a player can empathize with. Ness is a 2D sprite afflicted with an annoying status effect, and yet, somehow, as a player, this game got me to empathize with her. I mean, Ness is just a kid after all, a tired kid in a really, really dark cave. As an aside, there's also a lot of subtext thrown in here and there. This game unabashedly draws lines all over the place and simply allows the player to read in between them. If you've played this game and you don't know what I'm talking about, you might not have looked closely enough. Even through the translation, Itoi's writing is just phenomenal. Oh, Itoi, I still have to get to him, don't I? Well, Itoi wasn't the only member on the staff that worked on this game. Earthbound is very much his creation. He personally wrote all the text, which, considering this is an RPG, that's a huge chunk of this game's genetic makeup. However, that's not the only role he played in this game's creation. Judging by all the interviews I read, a lot of the aesthetic choices and important design decisions were actually made by him. And believe it or not, even as far back as the mid-90s, it honestly seems like he had a very good grasp of game design as a creative medium. Like, better than a lot of developers do today. It's kinda scary. And Earthbound, as a game, does play around with what games are capable of doing, and it has a lot of cool narrative ideas here and there. In some ways, it almost feels ahead of its time. Development on this game took a total of 5 years, which is pretty lengthy even by today's standards. And Itoi said several times that things got pretty rocky during those years. He even mentioned that he'd sometimes spend nights at the office sleeping on 3 lined-up chairs. That's extreme. Just when things were looking their darkest, President of HAL and programming whiz Satoru Iwata took the reins and saved the game's development. Later he became president of Nintendo and finally rose to power in 2018 as supreme ruler of the everything. Or not. While there is a whole bunch more I can and want to say about this game, from its fantastic enemy encounter system to the mechanics of its health bars to its downright diabolical copyright protection, I think I might save all that for another video. Earthbound is a groundbreaking game, and while sometimes its 90s does begin to peek out here and there, it almost makes the game that much more endearing. This game tells a great story that will warm your heart and tug at its strings. Just play it if you haven't, and if you've already played it, just play it again. Come on, you know you love it. Hey guys, Ronnie on ELDEN here.
I hope you get dismembered by bottlenose dolphins.
So Matt Pat did an Earthbound video of his own back in the day. It talks about cultists, police brutality, and a little bit of the old in out, in out. You should totally check it out. Also, Earthbound is a very interesting game with a very interesting history, and I've only just scraped the surface. If you want a more complete history or a thorough review, check both of these fantastic videos out by Rue and the HPGM. Really, these guys were great. You might notice some overlap here and there between some of the points all our videos cover, but that's just bound to happen when you're talking about the same game.
You steal men's ideas and call them your own. YouTube ill needs a theorist such as you.
Do you have problems? Back in February, I made a video about the evolution of Street Fighter's interface, and a bunch of you guys were wondering what I thought about Smash's interface because it's so wildly different from that of Street Fighter's. Which is a very good question, actually. So, in honor of Brawl's 5th anniversary as of last March... Wow, 5th anniversary? It's already been that long? Jeez. In honor of Brawl's 5th anniversary, we're talking some Smash. That sounds so awkward. So Smash is a very hard topic to cover because there are so many different ways to play Smash competitively.
Massive disclaimers.
and it changes so drastically between every game. And some higher level matches don't even resemble lower level matches, and stock matches are different from time matches, which are different from time stock matches. Don't even get me started on items, and then you have moves that have random properties, but then you have the hacks, which... No edge! No edge. All of this being said, there are common mechanics between each Smash game, and these mechanics remain more or less intact regardless of settings.
Massive disclaimers.
So I'll try my best to just talk about those. Keep in mind that I am painting with a very wide brush here, due to the subject matter, so I'm going to need some wiggle room here and there.
Massive disclaimers.
Also, I'm going to talk about the series from the point of view of the developers. Even though techniques such as wave dashing are fundamental to advanced play in certain Smash games, remember that a lot of these are either glitches or exploits, and the designers had no clue they even existed, and thus no reason to really take them into account when they were designing the game. Alright, so with those
massive disclaimers
out of the way, let's dig in. So is Smash just being different for the sake of being different, or is there some reason as to why its interface is so dissimilar? If you haven't seen the Life Bar video I mentioned earlier, I suggest you watch that because it lays a lot of groundwork for what I'm going to talk about here. One major thing I'd like to point out is that damage plays a much different role in Smash than it does in Street Fighter 2. In Street Fighter 2, damage is the sole deciding factor on which player wins. Even when time runs out, the player with more damage loses. At its core, it's Rock'em Sock'em Robots. If you hit your opponent enough times with any attack at all, they die and you win. The end. Everything is dead. Smash is much like a Nintendized version of sumo wrestling, where the goal is not to deplete your opponent's life bar, it's to knock your opponents off the stage more times than they knock you off. The scoreboard doesn't much care if you're at 0 damage or 600, it's only concerned with players falling outside the stage's boundaries. You can absorb 3 times the amount of damage your opponent absorbs, and they can still lose. This just doesn't happen in Street Fighter 2. Now don't misunderstand me, damage does play a role, by making you play further proportional to the amount of damage you take, but it's a much more passive role than the one it plays in Street Fighter. It can almost be thought of as a different mechanic entirely. Also, the amount of punishment a Smash character can take over the course of a match is ridiculous when compared to Street Fighter. Counting 0, Smash gives you 1000 hit points before your damage is maxed. And, for very good design reasons, most attacks deal less than 1% of damage to that total amount. Contrast this with Street Fighter 2, where, provided it's not blocked, any attack any character does is guaranteed to deal more than 1% of damage. This, along with the differing roles that damage plays, fundamentally alters the amount of time it takes to win a match in each game, which drastically changes the pacing.
Which is important.
A typical round of Street Fighter 2 lasts less than a minute, where standard stock matches of Smash can last twice as long. Because of Street Fighter 2's comparatively shorter matches, the players need to put the bulk of their attention on the action and spend less time up top. So finding a lightning quick and super simple way of displaying all of the necessary information without disrupting the pacing was a must. Smash's pacing is much different from Street Fighter 2's, however. Due to its mechanics, it tends to take a much slower and deliberate pace, so a lightning-fast way of displaying information isn't anywhere near as important. Couple this with damage itself behaving differently, and a change in interface might not be a bad idea. In my other video, I praised Street Fighter 4 when it made a single minute change to its mechanics and reflected this change in its interface. Well, I feel confident when I say that all of these fundamental changes that Smash makes to the usual formula would definitely warrant a few changes. If you were to use life bars, most attacks would only take slivers off at a time, and you'd almost always die before your life bar drained all the way, which might be perceived as a bit counterintuitive and just awkward. Also, as a result of Smash's mechanics, it becomes incredibly useful to know the exact amount of damage you and your opponent have, because different attacks can become incredibly dangerous once you've crossed certain damage thresholds. As an example, at 0 damage, even a fully charged arrow from Pit is no huge deal. At exactly 294 damage, things become much different. Pit's arrow can KO a medium-sized character no problem if it's fully charged, so numbers might just be the way to go. And since Smash's pacing is much slower to begin with, you don't have to worry about it bogging the play experience down like it would in Street Fighter. As for why the damage meters are at the bottom and not the top, this is also a result of damage playing a different role. In Smash, characters are sent flying through the air and have to recover all the time, so aerial combat carries much more emphasis. As a result, it just makes sense to place the damage meters at the bottom. The meters are also in order from left to right, respective to the controller ports, because it builds upon established mental connections. I'm player 3, my controller is in port 3, it makes sense that my meter would be the third one over. I do have issues with the timer placement though. I really just don't get it. Yeah, got nothing. So, on a surface level, these two games might look similar enough, but if you go deeper and look at the underlying mechanics, you'll notice a few notable differences, and these differences in mechanics have a huge impact on the final play experience. So much so that a change in interface is almost inevitable. It's like if you take two ships that are en route to the same harbor, but you turn one just 3 degrees clockwise before they set sail. At the start of the voyage, it looks like they might end up at about the same place, but if you actually follow everything through to its conclusion, you find that the two ships end up in drastically different places. And you might need different maps? I don't know, I think you guys get the analogy though, you're smart. And it's here that a lot of us start asking the question. Because of all the changes Smash makes to the usual fighting game formula, and the consequences that these changes have, can Smash be considered a fighting game?
I'm a giant squid of
Alright, you guys watching this video, your comments tend to be awesome, you're awesome, I trust you not to start a flame war. You guys are cooler than that.
It's the frickin' internet, and you're talking about Smash. What else do you expect?
I don't know, reasonable, respectful, and open discussion.
Then go home and watch a TED Talk.
So I don't think this is a particularly good question, and I'm only bringing it up because I know it's going to be asked in the comments if I don't address it here. So, whether or not Smash can be considered a fighting game is more of a question of semantics rather than design, and it's dependent on a few factors. 1. What is your definition of a fighting game? 2. How far is a game allowed to stray from that definition before it's no longer considered a fighting game? This is one of those personal things, and everybody has a different cutoff point. So by nature, very few people are going to agree, which is fine, because it's not a very important question to begin with. The conversation shouldn't be about whether or not Smash fits into a specific genre, but rather what Smash does and how good it is at doing what it does. Game genres are weird anyway. Like, sometimes we distinguish between genres based on the camera angle alone, regardless of how much or little this actually affects the play experience. But I've digressed. Smash makes some key changes to the usual formula, and it recognizes these changes and mirrors them in its interface design, which is a great design decision in my book. It also allows itself to be a great party game or a very solid competitive game, depending on how you, the player, wish to play it, which is awesome. But whether you love it, hate it, play it, shelf it, I think we can all agree on one thing. Slipping is just freaking stupid. Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here.
I'd rather brush my teeth with mercury than watch your intro again.
Jeez, dude. If you like the video, you can watch more here. I suggest you check out the Game Theory episode on Zelda power-ups. If you've ever wondered about real-life power bracelets or blue potions, you're gonna want to check it out. Also, I make somewhat of a cameo in it, so that's cool. Brushing your teeth with mercury? How would that even work? Critics loved it in the 90s, designers adore it today. It crystallized the concepts and set the standard of an entire genre, all in one breath. There's much that can be, and has been said about it. Its aesthetic, its music, its puzzles, its tone. Everything pieces together to create this downright delectable atmosphere. Its isolating, lonely, desolate atmosphere. You feel absolutely abandoned and entirely unaided on your journey, forced to figure things out and fend for yourself. But are you? Super Metroid is a beautiful experience, and if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend you pick up a copy and give it a shot right now, because I might give away a couple of the neat surprises that this game has in store for new players. Don't worry though, because there's still plenty I won't touch on. So with that out of the way, let's get to it. This game does an insanely good job of making the player feel completely alone and isolated, and it goes to great lengths to preserve this lonely atmosphere, which is no small feat considering that throughout the entire game, the designers are taking the player by the hand and gently guiding them through it. But they do it so well and so subtly that most players never even notice. So the game starts out with Samus taking the player up to speed on the status quo. She's a bounty hunter who came across a space pirate named Mother Brain. Mother Brain was an alright dude, save for the fact that she planned to use the Metroids to take over the entire galaxy, of course. So Samus figured it'd be a pretty good idea to, totally freaking kill Mother Brain with a crap ton of missiles. It still has brains on it. Not satisfied enough with her own bountitude, Samus takes it upon herself to visit the Metroid's home planet and completely exterminate every single one of those levitating life suckers except for one, which she hands over to scientists on a space colony. Because not only is she a bangin' bounty hunter, but she's a philanthropist to boot. So after saving the entire galaxy or some such, she's on her way out the door when suddenly that same space colony sends a distress signal her way. She throws her spaceship in reverse and decides to check it out. And this is where the genius begins. It throws the player in a vertical shaft where they have no idea what to expect as they descend. This means that players are likely going to take things a little slow and not just jump in and hope for the best. The slow and careful pace gives the player time to get their bearings, which means that they'll notice this mini-map in the upper right-hand corner as it begins to fill itself out as they make their descent. After reaching the bottom, the player goes right, and as they do so, they have to jump over these tiny steps that the designers have placed in their way. These steps are here to help the player get familiar with the jump physics, which feel a little odd before you get used to them. At this point, the player is probably feeling a little cozy as they haven't seen an enemy yet, and they've just been having fun front-flipping around everywhere. So the designers throw a curveball and have the player discover a bunch of dead bodies covered in blood. Bodies that were alive and sciencing just fine not 5 minutes earlier during the opening. So things just got real. It looks like that little Metroid might have escaped and violently murdered all those researchers. No pressure. You go through another corridor and it's the Metroid. Shoot it. Huh? What is... What is that? Shoot it. I'm glad that's over. Self-destruct? You gotta be kidding me! And so the first enemy is a boss fight, followed by an intense escape scene. Even Mario has to start out with a tiny Goomba. This game does not mess around. Not only does this establish a boatload of tension, but it also teaches the player a bunch of lessons. 1. Never get too cozy. We will throw a boss at you 3 minutes into the game. Thug life, get on our level. 2. You can fire in 8 directions. During the opening, the game clearly shows Samus pointing her gun diagonally, so after seeing this, the player might instinctually do the same when this boss first takes flight. This boss, his name is Ridley by the way, say hi, his attacks are specifically designed to teach a player how to effectively control Samus during a fight. How to dodge, how to shoot, how to dodge and shoot. And this ties into the third lesson. 3. How to platform. After this fight, the escape segment makes sure that the player knows how to control Samus properly, as they can't continue until they are able to escape the colony before it explodes. This isn't an incredibly hard challenge by any stretch, but whether the player does it on their first try or the fourth, it creates tension and promotes mastery. So we're 5 minutes into the game and the player already knows how to platform and fight with the best of them. They've also gotten a handle on the minimap and the entire tone of the experience has been set. All of this, and there hasn't even been a single text box or speech bubble. The player found it out on their own because the space colony is specifically designed for them to learn these concepts. This wordless way of showing the player what to do pretty much permeates the entire game, and it's handled incredibly well. Like here, the player is exploring when they stumble upon a huge clump of enemies that take quite a few shots to kill. The next room is filled with a bunch of enemies whom the player can't kill at all. But if the player presses onward, they find a new item called the Plasma Beam. Now they could just bog the experience down by telling the player verbatim what the Plasma Beam does, but that's not how Samus rolls. They instead have the player learn by doing. After getting this new beam, the player will naturally want to try it out by shooting at these once invincible enemies. And they discover that, yeah, this beam can totally hurt them now. Sweet. Then, to exit this area, they have to go back to the room with that weird clump of enemies. The player shoots at the clump, and look! These enemies are way easier to kill because the plasma beam goes through and hits all of them at once, as opposed to doing it one by one, like the old gun did. Here, there is no need to pin the player down with long-winded explanations. A player is invariably going to be curious about a new item, so the developers just had to create the proper conditions that gave the player an organic explanation of this beam's properties. It keeps the player immersed in the experience, and it demonstrates some pretty skilled craftsmanship on the designer's part. They didn't need to use any of this. Oh no, this video is similar enough as is. The trolls don't need any more ammo. And before you guys rail me in the comments, I'm aware that there are these small text boxes that pop up whenever Samus gets a new item, but this just tells the player which buttons to push in order to select the item, as opposed to telling the player every enemy this item affects and every circumstance this item can be used. These wordless tutorials would be absolutely useless if a player had no clue how to use the item in the first place. This game's heavy show-don't-tell mentality also helps to cement different things within the mind of the player. Take this for example. While players are exploring, they might come across this room. What is that? I haven't seen anything like it. Judging by the map, it looks like it's an entrance, but what the Franz Joseph Haydn is that? Why can't I jump that high? I want to know what's in there. I want to be in you. After trying and failing to jump up there, the player leaves this room behind and goes about their business. After a while, they stumble into this room, which, oh no, they can't get out. No worries though, because this ball contains the high jump boots. Now they can jump more than high enough to make their escape, which begs the question, were there any other areas I've seen that were too high? Oh, this guy, I'm totally going to find out what's in you. So, sure enough, they go back to the room and find that these new boots can jump high enough. And the peasants rejoice. It seems like a very simple and straightforward scenario, but that's the genius of it. The designers cemented this door in the player's mind without using any text or dialogue. They made the door look bizarre and odd, which instilled the player with a sense of curiosity. And when the player just could not manage to reach it, they had to leave with a nagging feeling of dissatisfaction. Then, later on, when the player finds the boots, the developers used the level design itself as a reminder. Hey, remember the other time when you couldn't jump high enough? They were able to tease, remind, and pay the player off without using a single line of text on screen. It's amazing, and most players don't even think about it because it's done with such subtlety. The designers were able to gently nudge the player while still leaving more than enough room to let them feel empowered. This is game design, and it's an incredibly hard balance to achieve. If the designers stopped right here, the game would be good. But they didn't. They went further and made this game great. Say you're at the end of the game, you have hundreds of missiles, every health upgrade, and you just beat the boss. The credits roll and 75% completion? What? Not only is this game great on a first playthrough, but it's also just as good on subsequent playthroughs because it challenges and rewards the player for beating it faster and finding more items. Whether you're just a casual, a completionist, or a speedrunner, this game has goodies for players of all sorts. For example, aside from all the hidden power-ups, of which there are many, there are also a few secret skills that the designers put in this game. You don't have to know about any of them in order to beat the game. However, if you do find out about them, they can make subsequent playthroughs incredibly fun, because you can use them to access certain areas and items sooner than you ordinarily could. This opens up new layers of experimentation and exploration and keeps the game fresh for veteran players. Say it's my second playthrough and I come across this room again. Now I'm a seasoned Metroid vet, and I know how to bomb hop like a pro. Boom, I could have gotten up here without the boots all along and I didn't even know it. How awesome is that? Most games would catch this sort of thing during playtesting and do something to discourage it, like throw an invisible wall in. But the designers realized that experimentation and exploration are the lifeblood of this game. So they said, oh hey cool, let's just design around it. So they went ahead and purposefully designed areas and items that can be reached several different ways, with some ways being much more obvious than others. In design, this is called perceptible and hidden affordance. So first-time players might do the obvious or perceptible thing, while veteran players might have fun and try to do the less obvious or hidden thing. This makes things easy and accessible for new players, but still leaves possibilities and discoveries open for vets. And no, none of this is by accident. If you read any of the staff interviews or even play the game, it's pretty obvious that these guys knew exactly what they were doing, and they went to great lengths to do it. During the last few months of development, the team of 15 people who worked on this game had to slave away around the clock to get it out on time. Often they chose not to go home at all and instead opted to just sleep at the office. No joke, these guys are like Swindon, they're finishers. Seriously though, I've only just scraped the surface of the layers upon layers of genius that this game has to offer. This game finds ways to communicate ideas and teach the player how to play through the level design itself, while also leaving room for older players to experiment. It's just a fascinating study in game design and perhaps one of the most analyzed and beloved games from the 16-bit era. If you've never played it, you owe it to yourself to pick it up and try it out, because for a sci-fi game, there's definitely a lot of magic happening here. Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here.
Your intro made me want to die.
My buddies Matt, Pat, and Gerard the Completionist just made an
Ultra Epic Omega Crossover Video
that you can watch over here.
Yeah, I already saw it. It was way better than this crap. I was just playing Metal Gear Solid 4. You sound like Otacon.
Metal Gear Solid 4? I love that movie.
Dude, that joke was old like 4 years ago.
You can take a look at just about any successful fighting game series today, and chances are their interface is going to look something like this. The colors might be different, the size or spacing might change, but the underlying structure is still there. Some people might chalk this up to just being a trope of the genre at this point. It's so common that if you were to change it, you'd just be alienating players. And that is very true, however, there are actual reasons behind laying out a fighting game's interface this way. And these reasons go much, much deeper than mere tradition. Fighting games blew up in the 90s, and unlike Pogs and Rob Liefeld, they are still pretty popular today. Heck, in my Wii U video, I casually made a comment about Evo that was only on screen for a fraction of a second, and a bunch of you guys leapt at it and put your own 2 cents in. You guys are awesome. But despite the genre's past and present popularity, we need to keep in mind that there used to be a time before Shoryukens and Buster Wolfs, and everything about fighting game design wasn't really as obvious to designers back then as it is today. Designers in the past really had to experiment and discover the best ways to go about doing certain things, and this interface is among one of those things. To get a sense of what we've inherited, let's put ourselves in the shoes of a designer from those years of yore, and break down the process of creating a fighting game interface and learn just why this interface has become so common. To anchor this in reality, let me give you a quick scenario. The year is 1987 and you're working at Capcom. You just got tasked to figure out how to lay out the hit points and timer for some weird martial arts arcade game named Street Fighter. You totally geek out for a second because you played the crap out of its sequel, and then you remember it's not the 90s yet and the sequel doesn't even exist. Alright, so what should the hit points look like? Should they be numbers, bars, icons, what? Numbers are the most precise, but it might take a player longer to read 60 out of 100 than it would to just show a bar here. And a player has to keep track of their opponent's life as well as their own. So that's a whole bunch of digits to read, and this game is pretty fast-paced, so it's best if the player can just surmise the current conditions with a quick glance.
BFD.
They don't need to know the exact amount